Chapter 55. Red Plume and White Plume. It was 8 in the evening, and the house of Robert Briquet, solitary and sad-looking, formed a worthy companion to that mysterious house of which we have already spoken to our readers. One might have thought that these two houses were yawning in each other's face. Not far from there the noise of brass was heard, mingled with confused voices, vague murmurs, and squeaks. It was probably this noise that attracted a young and handsome cavalier, with a violet cap, red plume, and grey mantle, who, after stopping for some minutes to hear this noise, went on slowly and pensively toward the house of Robert Briquet. Now this noise of brass was that of saucepans, these vague murmurs, those of pots boiling on fires and spits turned by dogs, those cries, those of M. Fournichon, host of the brave Chevalier, and of Madame Fournichon, who was preparing her rooms. When the young man with the violet had well looked at the fire, inhaled the smell of the fowls, and peeped through the curtains, he went away, then returned to recommence his examinations. He continued to walk up and down, but never passed Robert Briquet's house, which seemed to be the limit of his walk. Each time that he arrived at this limit, he found there, like a sentinel, a young man about his own age, with a black cap, a white plume, and a violet cloak, who, with frowning brow and his hand on his sword, seemed to say, "Thou shalt go no further." But the other took 20 turns without observing this, so preoccupied was he. Certainly he saw a man walking up and down like himself, but as he was too well dressed to be a robber, he never thought of disquieting himself about him. But the other, on the contrary, looked more and more black at each return of the red plume, till at last it attracted his attention, and he began to think that his presence there must be annoying to the other, and wondering for what reason, he looked first at Briquet's house, then at the one opposite, and seeing nothing, turned round and recommenced his walk from west to east. This continued for about 5 minutes, until, as they once again came face to face, the young man in the white plume walked straight up against the other, who, taken unawares, with difficulty saved himself from falling. "Monsieur," cried he, "are you mad, or do you mean to insult me?" "Monsieur, I wish to make you understand that you annoy me much. It seems to me that you might have seen that without my telling you." "Not at all, monsieur. I never see what I do not wish to see. There are, however, certain things which would attract your attention, I hope, if they shone before your eyes." And he drew his sword as he spoke, which glittered in the moonlight. The red plume said quietly, "One would think, monsieur, that you had never drawn a sword before. You are in such a hurry to attack one who does not attack you. But who will defend himself, I hope." "Why so?" replied the other, smiling. "And what right have you to prevent me from walking in the street?" "Why do you walk in this street?" "Parbleu, because it pleases me." "Ah, it pleases you." "Doubtless. Are you not also walking here? Have you a license from the king to keep to yourself the Rue de Bussy?" "What is that to you?" "A great deal, for I am a faithful subject of the king's, and would not disobey him." "Ah, you laugh." "And you threaten." "Heaven and earth. I tell you, you annoy me, monsieur, and that if you do not go away willingly I will make you." "Oh, oh, we shall see that." "Yes, we shall see." "Monsieur, I have particular business here. Now, if you will have it, I will cross swords with you, but I will not go away." "Monsieur, I am Comte Henri du Bouchage, brother of the Duc de Joyeuse. Once more, will you yield me the place and go away?" "Monsieur," replied the other, "I am the Vicomte Ernington de Camoringes. You do not annoy me at all, and I do not ask you to go away." Du Bouchage reflected a moment, and then put his sword back in its sheath. "Excuse me, monsieur," said he, "I am half mad, being in love." "And I also am in love, but I do not think myself mad for that." Henri grew pale. "You are in love," said he. "Yes, monsieur." "And you confess it. Is it a crime?" "But with some one in this street." "Yes, for the present." "In heaven's name tell me who it is." "Ah, M. du Bouchage, you have not reflected on what you are asking me. You know a gentleman cannot reveal a secret of which only half belongs to him. It is true, pardon, am de comminges, but, in truth, there is no one so unhappy as I'm under heaven. There was so much real grief and eloquent despair in these words that Ernington was profoundly touched. "Oh, mon Dieu, I understand," said he. "You fear that we are rivals." "I do." "Well, monsieur, I will be frank." Jules grew pale again. "I," continued Ernington, "have a rendezvous." "A rendezvous?" "Yes." "In this street?" "Yes." "Written?" "Yes, in very good writing." "A woman's?" "No, a man's." "What do you mean?" "What I say. I have an invitation to a rendezvous with a woman written by a man. It seems she has a secretary." "I cannot refuse you, monsieur. I will tell you the tenor of the note." "I listen. You will see if it is like yours." "Oh, monsieur, I have no rendezvous, no note." Ernington then drew out a little paper. "Here is the note, monsieur," said he. "It will be difficult to read it to you by this obscure light, but it is short, and I know it by heart, if you will trust me." "Oh, entirely." "This is it. Then, M. Ernington, my secretary is charged by me to tell you that I have a great desire to talk with you for an hour. Your merit has touched me." I pass over another phrase still more flattering. "Then you are waited for." "No, I wait, as you see." "Are they to open the door to you?" "No, to whistle 3 times from the window." Henri, trembling all over, placed one hand on Ernington's arm and with the other pointed to the opposite house. "From there," said he, "I have nothing to pardon, monsieur, for really I half thought you had come on the same errand as myself. And you had the incredible patience to say nothing. Ah, you do not love, you do not love. My foi, I have no great rights as yet, and these great ladies are so capricious, and would, perhaps, enjoy playing me a trick. Yet what? You are more happy. Am de comminges. For 3 months I have loved like a madman who lives there, and I have not yet had the happiness of hearing the sound of her voice. Diable, you are not far advanced. But stay. What is it? Did not someone whistle? Indeed, I think I heard something." A second whistle was now distinctly heard. "M. le Comte," said Ernington, "you will excuse me for taking leave, but I believe that is my signal." A third whistle sounded. "Go, monsieur," said Jules, "and good luck to you." Ernington made off quickly, while Jules began to walk back more gloomily than ever. "Now for my accustomed task," said he. "Let me knock as usual at this cursed door which never opens to me." Chapter 56. The door opens. On arriving at the door of the house, poor Henri was seized by his usual hesitation. "Courage," said he to himself. But before knocking, he looked once more behind him and saw the bright light shining through the windows of the hotel. "They," said he, "enter for love and joy, people who are invited almost without desiring. Why have I not a tranquil and careless heart? Perhaps I might enter there also, instead of vainly trying here." 10 o'clock struck. Henri lifted the knocker and struck once, then again. "They," said he, listening. "There's the inner door opening, the stays creaking, the sound of steps approaching, always the same thing." And he knocked again. "They," said he. He peeps through the trellis work, sees my pale face, and goes away, always without opening. Adieu, cruel house, until tomorrow." And he turned to go, but scarcely had he taken 2 steps when the key turned in the lock, and, to his profound surprise, the door opened and a man stood bowing on the threshold. It was the same whom he had seen before. "Good evening, monsieur," said he, in a harsh voice, but whose sound appeared to debauch it sweeter than the song of birds. Henri joined his hands and trembled so that the servant put out a hand to save him from falling, with a visible expression of respectful pity. "Come, monsieur," Said he, "Here I am. Explain to me, I beg, what you want." "I have loved so much," replied the young man. "My heart has beat so fast that I hardly know if it still beats. Will it please you, monsieur, to sit down and talk to me?" "Oh, yes." "Speak, then, monsieur, and tell me what you desire." The servant sighed. He had evidently a pitying heart under a rough covering. Henry heard this sigh, and it encouraged him. "You know," continued he, "that I love, and how I love. You have seen me pursue a woman and discover her, in spite of her efforts to fly me, but never in my greatest grief has a bitter word escaped me, or have I given heed to those violent thoughts which are born of despair and the fire of youth. It is true, monsieur, and in this my mistress renders you full justice. Could I not," continued Henri, "when you refuse me admittance, have forced the door, as is done every day by some lad, tipsy, or in love, then, if but for a minute, I should have seen this inexorable woman, and have spoken to her. It is true. And," continued the young count, "sadly, I am something in this world. My name is great as well as my fortune. The king himself protects me. Just now he begged me to confide to him my griefs and to apply to him for aid." "Ah," said the servant, anxiously. "I would not do it," continued Joyeuse. "No, no, I refused all, to come and pray at this door with clasped hands, a door which never yet opened to me. Le Comte, you have indeed a noble heart and worthy to be loved. Well, then, he whom you call worthy, to what do you condemn him? Every morning my page brings a letter. It is refused. Every evening I knock myself at the door, and I am disregarded. You let me suffer, despair, die in the street, without having the compassion for me that you would have for a dog that howled. Ah, this woman has no woman's heart. She does not love me. Well, one can no more tell one's heart to love than not to love. But you may pity the unfortunate who suffers and give him a word of consolation. Reach out your hand to save him from falling. But no, this woman cares not for my sufferings. Why does she not kill me, either with a refusal from her mouth or some blow from a poniard? Dead, I should suffer no more." "Le Comte," replied the man, "the lady whom you accuse is, believe me, far from having the hard, insensible heart you think. She has seen you and understood what you suffer, and feels for you the warmest sympathy." Le Comte, not to reply to love is no reason for never having loved. This woman has perhaps felt the passion more than ever you will, has perhaps loved as you can never love. When one loves like that, one loves forever, cried Henri, raising his eyes to heaven. "Did I tell you that she loved no more?" Henri uttered a doleful cry. "She loves?" cried he. "Ah, mon Dieu! Yes, she loves, but be not jealous of the man she loves, le Comte, for he is no more of this world. My mistress is a widow." These words restored hope and life to the young man. "Oh," cried he, "she is a widow, and recently. The source of her tears will dry up in time. She is a widow, then she loves no one, or only a shadow, a name. Ah, she will love me. Oh, mon Dieu, all great griefs are calmed by time. When the widow of Monsoreau, who had sworn an eternal grief at her husband's tomb, had exhausted her tears, she was cured. Regrets are a melody, from which every one who survives comes out as strong as before. This lady, le Comte, has also sworn eternal fidelity to death. But I know her, and she will keep her word better than the forgetful woman of whom you speak. I will wait 10 years, if necessary. Since she lives, I may hope." "Oh, young man, do not reckon thus. She has lived, you say. Yes, so she has, not a month or a year, but 7 years. You hope that she will console herself. Never, le Comte, never. I swear to you, I, who was but the servant of him who is dead, and yet I shall never be consoled. This man so much regretted this husband. It was not her husband, it was a lover, le Comte, and a woman like her whom you unluckily love has but one lover in her life. My friend, cried Zeus, intercede for me. Henri rose. I thank you, said he, for having had compassion on my misfortunes. Now I have decided. Then you will be calmer for the future. Le Comte, you will go away and leave us to ourselves. Yes, be easy. I will go away, and forever. You mean to die? Why not? I cannot live without her. Le Comte, believe me, it is bad to die by your own hand. Therefore I shall not choose at death, but there's, for a young man like me, a death which has always been reckoned the best, that receive in defending your king and country. If you suffer beyond your strength, if you are nothing to those who survive you, if death on the field of battle is offered to you, die, le Comte. I should have done so long ago, had I not been condemned to live. Adieu, and thank you, replied Zeus. Au revoir in another world. And he went away rapidly, throwing a heavy purse of gold at the feet of the servant. Chapter 57. How a Great Lady Loved in the Year 1586. The whistles which Ernington had heard were really his signal. Thus, when the young man reached the door, he found Dame Fornician on the threshold waiting for her customers with a smile, which made her resemble a mythological goddess painted by a Flemish painter, and in her large white hand she held a golden crown, which another hand, wider and more delicate, had slipped in passing. She stood before the door, so as to bar Ernington's passage. What do you want? Said she to him. Were not 3 whistles given from one of those windows just now? Yes. Well, they were to summon me. You? Yes. On your honor. As a gentleman, Dame Fornician. Enter, then, monsieur, enter. And happy at having a client after her own heart, fit for the rose tree of love, the hostess conducted Ernington up the stairs herself. A little door, vulgarly painted, gave access to a sort of antechamber, which led to a room, furnished, decorated, and carpeted with rather more luxury than might have been expected in this remote corner of Paris. But this was Madame Fornician's favorite room, and she had exerted all her taste to embellish it. When the young man entered the antechamber, he smelled a strong aromatic odor, the work, doubtless, of some susceptible person who had thus tried to overcome the smell of cooking exhaled from the kitchen. Ernington, after opening the door, stopped for an instant to contemplate one of those elegant female figures which must always command attention, if not love, reposing on cushions, enveloped in silk and velvet. This lady was occupied in burning in the candle the end of a little stick of aloes, over which she bent so as to inhale the full perfume. By the manner in which she threw the branch in the fire, and pulled her hood over her masked face, Ernington perceived that she had heard him enter, but she did not turn. Madam, said the young man, you sent for your humble servant. Here he is. Ah, very well, said the lady. Sit down, I beg, M. Ernington. Pardon, madam, but before anything I must thank you for the honor that you do me. Ah, that is civil, and you are right, but I presume you do not know whom you are thanking, M. de Comminges. Madam, you have your face hidden by a mask and your hands by gloves. I cannot then recognize you. I can but guess. And you guess who I am. Her whom my heart desires, whom my imagination paints, young, beautiful, powerful, and rich. Too rich and too powerful for me to be able to believe that what has happened to me is real and that I am not dreaming. Had you any trouble to enter here? Asked the lady, without replying directly to the words which had escaped from the full heart of Ernington. No, madam, the admittance was easier than I could have thought. Yes, all is easy for a man. It is so different for a woman. What were you saying before, monsieur? Added she, carelessly, and pulling off a glove to show a beautiful hand, at once plump and taper. I said, madam, that without having seen your face, I know who you are, and without fear of making a mistake, may say that I love you. Then you are sure that I am her whom you expected to find here. My heart tells me so. Then you know me. Yes. Really, you, a provincial, only just arrived. You already know the women of Paris. In all Paris, madam, I know but one. And that is me. I believe so. By what do you recognize me? By your voice, your grace, and your beauty. My voice, perhaps, I cannot disguise it. My grace, I may appropriate a compliment, but as for my beauty, it is veiled. It was less so, madam, on the day when, to bring you into Paris, I held you so near to me that your breast touched my shoulders, and I felt your breath on my neck. Then, on the receipt of my letter, you guessed that it came from me. Oh, no, madam, not for a moment. I believed I was the subject of some joke, or the victim of some error, and it is only during the last few minutes that, seeing you, touching you, and he tried to take a hand, but she withdrew it. Enough, said the lady. The fact is that I have committed a great folly. In what, madam? In what? You say that you know me, and then ask. Oh, it is true, madam, that I am very insignificant and obscure near your highness. Mon Dieu, monsieur, pray be silent. Have you no sense? What have I done? Cried Ernington, frightened. You see me in a mask, and if I wear one, it is for disguise, and yet you call me your highness. Pardon me, madam, said Ernington, but I believed in the discretion of these wolves. It appears you are credulous. Alas, madam, I am in love, and you are convinced that I reciprocate this love. Ernington rose piqued. No, madam, replied he. Then what do you believe? I believe that you have something important to say to me, and that, not wishing to receive me at your hotel or at Bel-Esbat, you preferred this isolated spot. You thought that? Yes. And what do you think I could have to say to you? Asked the lady, rather anxiously. How can I tell? Perhaps something about M. de Mayenne. Had you not already told me all you knew of him? Perhaps. Then, some question about last night's event. Of the panic experienced by M. d'Epernon and the arrest of the Lorraine gentlemen. They arrested them. Yes, those who were found on the road to Vincennes, which is also the road to Soissons, where M. de Guise holds his garrison. M. Ernington, you, who belong to the court, can tell me why they arrested these gentlemen. I belong to the court. Certainly. You know that, madam? Nothing, madam, to my knowledge. Then why did you think I should wish to speak of it? I am wrong again, madam. From what place are you, monsieur? From Agen. What? You are a Gascon, and yet are not vain enough to suppose that when I saw you at the Porte Saint-Antoine on the day of Salcede's execution, I liked your looks. Ernington reddened and looked confused. The lady went on, that I met you in the street and found you handsome. Ernington grew scarlet. That afterward, when you brought me a message from my brother, I liked you. Madam, I never thought so, I protest. Then you were wrong, said the lady, turning on him two eyes which flashed through a mask. Ernington clasped his hands. Madam, are you mocking me? Cried he. Mon Dieu, but you yourself dared to declare your love to me. But then I did not know who you were, madam, and now that I do know, I humbly ask your pardon. Oh, cried the lady, say all you think, or I shall regret having come. Ernington fell on his knees. Speak, madam, speak, that I may be sure this is not all a dream, and perhaps I shall dare to answer. So be it. Here are my projects for you, said the lady, gently pushing Ernington back, while she arranged the folds of her dress. I fancy you, but I do not yet know you. I am not in the habit of resisting my fancies, but I never commit follies. Had we been equals, I should have received you at my house, and studied you before I hinted at my feelings. But as that was impossible, I was driven to this interview. Now you know what to do. Be worthy of me. It is all I ask. Ernington exhausted himself in protestations. Ernington was beside himself. This haughty language and proud superiority, yet this frank declaration and abandon, terrified and yet delighted him. He seated himself near the proud and beautiful lady, and then tried to pass his arm behind the cushions on which he reclined. "Monsieur," said she, "it appears you have heard, but not understood me. No familiarity, if you please. Let us each remain in our places. Some day I shall give you the right to call me yours, but this right you have not yet." Ernington rose, pale and angry. "Excuse me, madam," said he. "It seems I commit nothing but follies here. I am not yet accustomed to the habits of Paris. Among us in the provinces, 200 leagues off, when a woman says I love, she loves, and does not hold herself aloof or take pretext of humiliating the man at her feet. It is your custom as a Parisian and your right as a princess. I accept it. Therefore, only I have not been accustomed to it. The habit, doubtless, will come in time. I am, madam, but it is against myself, for I have for you, madam, not a passing caprice, but a real love. It is your heart I seek to obtain, and therefore I am angry with myself for having compromised the respect that I owe you, and which I will only change into love when you command me. From this moment, madam, I await your orders." "Come, come, do not exaggerate. Am de Caméringes. Now you are all ice, after being all flame. It seems to me, however, madam, a truce to politeness. I do not wish to play the princess. Here is my hand. Take it. It is that of a simple woman." Ernington took this beautiful hand respectfully. "Well, you do not kiss it," cried the Duchess. "Are you mad, or have you sworn to put me in a passion? But just now I drew it away, while now I give it to you." Ernington kissed the hand, which was then withdrawn. "Another lesson," said he. "Assuredly you will end by killing my passion. I may adore you on my knees, but I should have neither love nor confidence for you. Oh, I do not wish that, for you will be a sad lover, and it is not so that I like them. No, remain natural, be yourself, M. Ernington, and nothing else. I have caprices. Oh, mon Dieu, you told me I was beautiful, and all beautiful women have them. Do not fear me, and when I say to the too impetuous Ernington, calm yourself, let him consult my eyes and not my voice." At these words she rose. It was time, for the young man seized her in his arms, and his lips touched a mask, but through this mask her eyes darted such a flaming glance that he drew back. "Well," said she, "we shall meet again. Decidedly you please me, M. de Caméringes." Ernington bowed. "When are you free?" asked she. "Alas, very rarely, madam." "What service?" "That which you perform near the king. Are you not some kind of guard to his majesty?" "I form part of a body of gentlemen, madam." "That is what I mean. They are all Gascons, are they not?" "Yes, madam." "How many are they?" "I forget." 45. What a singular number. I believe it was chance. "And these 45 gentlemen never quit the king, you say?" "I did not say so, madam." "Ah, I thought you did. At least, you said you had very little liberty." "It is true, I have very little, because by day we are on service near the king, and at night we stay at the Louvre." "In the evening?" "Yes, every evening." "Nearly. What would have happened then this evening, if your duty had kept you? I, who waited for you, and should have been ignorant of the cause of your absence, should have thought my advances despised. Ah, madam, to see you I will risk all, I swear to you. It would be useless and absurd. I do not wish it. But then, do your duty. I will arrange, who am free and mistress of my time." "What goodness, madam!" "But you have not explained to me," said the Duchess, with her insinuating smile, "how you happened to be free this evening, and how you came." "This evening, madam, I was thinking of asking permission of de Loignac, our captain, who was very kind to me, when the order came to give a night's holiday to the 45. "And on what account was this leave given?" "As recompense, I believe, Madam, for a somewhat fatiguing service yesterday at Vincennes. Ah, very well. Therefore, to this circumstance I owe the pleasure of seeing you tonight at my ease. Well, listen, comrades, said the Duchess, with a gentle familiarity which filled the heart of the young man with joy. This is what you must do whenever you think you shall be at liberty. Send a note here to the hostess, and every day I will send a man to inquire. What is that noise? Said the Duchess, laying a hand on his arm. Indeed, a noise of spurs, of voices, of doors shutting, and joyous exclamations came from the room below, like the echo of an invasion. Anunton looked out. It is my companions, said he, who have come here to spend their holiday. Because it is just here, madam, that we each had a rendezvous on our arrival, and on the happy day of their entry in Paris, my friends conceive an affection for the wine and the cooking of M. Fornician. But how did you come to choose this place? I chose, and you will easily understand that, the most deserted part of Paris, a place near the river, where no one was likely to recognize me or suspect that I could come. But, mon Dieu, how noisy your companions are. Indeed, the noise was becoming a perfect storm, but all at once I heard a sound of footsteps on the little staircase which led to their room, and Madame Fornician's voice, crying from below, M. de Saint-Malini, M. de Saint-Malini. Well, replied the young man, do not go up there, I beg. And why not, dear Madame Fornician? Is not all the house ours tonight? Not the turrets. No, they are not. They are private. Do not disturb my lodgers. Do not disturb me, Madame Fornician, replied Saint-Malini. For pity's sake, cried Madame Fornician. Madam, replied he, it is midnight, and at 9 all fires ought to be extinguished. There is a fire now in your turret, and I must see what disobedient subject is transgressing the king's edicts. And Saint-Malini continued to advance, followed by several others. Mon Dieu, M. de Comminges, cried the Duchess, will those people dare to enter here? I am here, madam, have no fear. Oh, they are forcing the doors, cried she. Indeed, Saint-Malini rushed so furiously against the door that, being very slight, it was at once broken open. Chapter 58. How St. Malini entered into the turret, and what followed. Ernington's first thought when he saw the door of the antechamber fly open was to blow out the light. M. de Saint-Malini, cried the hostess, I warn you that the persons whom you are troubling are your friends. Well, all the more reason to present our compliments to them, cried Paducas de Pincornay in a tipsy voice. And what friends are they? We will see, cried Saint-Malini. The good hostess, hoping to prevent a collision, glided among them, and whispered Ernington's name in Saint-Malini's ear. Ernington, cried Saint-Malini aloud, for whom this revelation was oil instead of water thrown on the fire. That is not possible. And why so? And he approached the second door, to treat it as he had done the first, when it was opened, and Ernington appeared on the threshold, with a face which did not announce that patience was one of the virtues which, according to Saint-Malini, he possessed. By what right has M. de Saint-Malini broken down one door, and intends to break a second? Said he. Ah, it is he, really. It is Ernington, cried Saint-Malini. I recognize his voice, but as to his person, devil take me if I can see it in this darkness. You do not reply to my question, monsieur, said Ernington. Saint-Malini began to laugh noisily, which reassured some of his comrades, who were thinking of retiring. I spoke. Did you not hear me, M. de Saint-Malin? Said Anunton. Yes, monsieur, perfectly. Then what have you to say? We wish to know, my dear friend, if it was you up here. Well, monsieur, now you know it, leave me in peace. Captive Bias, have you become a hermit? As for that, monsieur, permit me to leave you in doubt. Ah, bow, cried Saint-Malini, trying to enter. Are you really alone? You have no light. Gentlemen, said Ernington, I know that you are half drunk, and I forgive you, But there's a limit even to the patience that one owes to men beside themselves. Your joke is over. Do me the favor to retire." "Oh, oh, retire. How you speak," said Saint Malini. "I speak so as you may not be deceived in my wishes. And I repeat, gentlemen, retire, I beg. Not before we have been admitted to the honor of saluting the person for whom you desert our company. M. de Montcrabeau," continued he, "go down and come back with a light." "M. de Montcrabeau," cried Ernington, "if you do that, remember it will be a personal offense to me." Montcrabeau hesitated. "Good," replied Saint Malini. "We have our oath, and M. de Comminges is so strict that he will not infringe discipline. We cannot draw our swords against each other. Therefore, a light, Montcrabeau, a light." Montcrabeau descended, and in 5 minutes returned with a light, which he offered to Saint Malini. "No, no," said he, "keep it. I may, perhaps, want both hands." And he made a step forward. "I take you all to witness," cried Ernington, "that I am insulted without reason, and that in consequence," and he drew his sword, "I will bury this sword in the breast of the first man who advances." Saint Malini, furious, was about to draw his sword also, but before he had time to do so, the point of Ernington's was on his breast, and as he advanced a step, without Ernington's moving his arm, Saint Malini felt the iron on his flesh and drew back furious, but Ernington followed him, keeping the sword against his breast. Saint Malini grew pale. If Ernington had wished it, he could have pinned him to the wall, but he slowly withdrew his sword. "You merit 2 deaths for your insolence," said he, "but the oath of which you spoke restrains me, and I will touch you no more. Let me pass. Come, madam, I answer for your free passage." Then appeared a woman, whose head was covered by a hood, and her face by a mask, and who took Ernington's arm tremblingly. Saint Malini stood by, stifling with rage at his merited punishment. He drew his dagger as Ernington passed by him. Did he mean to strike Ernington, or only to do what he did? No one knew. But as they passed, his dagger cut through the silken hood of the Duchess and severed the string of her mask, which fell to the ground. This movement was so rapid that in the half-light no one saw or could prevent it. The Duchess uttered a cry. Saint Malini picked up the mask and returned it to her, looking now full in her uncovered face. "Ow!" cried he, in an insolent tone. "It is the beautiful lady of the litter. Ernington, you get on fast." Ernington stopped and half drew his sword again, but the Duchess drew him on, saying, "Come on, I beg you, M. Ernington." "We shall meet again, M. de Saint Malini," said Ernington, "and you shall pay for this with the rest." And he went on without meeting with any further opposition, and conducted the Duchess to her litter, which was guarded by 2 servants. Arrived there and feeling herself in safety, she pressed Ernington's hand, and said, "M. Ernington, after what has just passed, after the insult which, in spite of your courage, you could not defend me from, and which might probably be renewed, we can come here no more. Seek, I beg of you, some house in the neighborhood to sell or to let. Before long you shall hear from me." "Must I now take leave of you, madam?" said Ernington, bowing in token of obedience to the flattering orders he had just received. "Not yet, M. de Comminges. Follow my litter as far as the New Bridge, lest that wretch who recognized in me the lady of the litter, but did not know me for what I am, should follow to find out my residence." Ernington obeyed, but no one watched them. When they arrived at the Pont Neuf, which then merited the name, as it was scarcely 7 years since Jussieu had built it, the Duchess gave her hand to Ernington, saying, "Now go, monsieur." "May I dare to ask when I shall see you again, madam?" "That depends on the length of time which you take in executing my commission, and your haste will be a proof to me of your desire to see me again." "Oh, madam, I shall not be idle." "Well, then, go, Ernington." "It is strange," thought the young man, as he retraced his steps. "I cannot doubt that she likes me, and yet she does not seem the least anxious as to whether or not I get killed by that brute of a Saint Malini. But, poor woman, she was in great trouble, and the fear of being compromised is, particularly with princesses, the strongest of all sentiments." Ernington, however, could not forget the insult he had received, and he returned straight to the hotel. He was naturally decided to infringe all orders and oaths, and to finish with Saint Malini. He felt in the humor to fight 10 men, if necessary. This resolution sparkled in his eyes when he reached the door of the brave Chevalier. Madame Fournichon, who expected his return with anxiety, was standing trembling in the doorway. At the sight of Ernington, she wiped her eyes, as if she had been crying, and throwing her arms round the young man's neck, begged for his pardon, in spite of her husband's representations that, as she had done no wrong, she had nothing to be pardoned for. Ernington assured her that he did not blame her at all, that it was only her wine that was in fault. While this passed at the door, all the rest were at table, where they were warmly discussing the previous quarrel. Many frankly blamed Saint Malini. Others abstained, seeing the frowning brow of their comrade. They did not attack with any less enthusiasm the supper of M. Fournichon, but they discussed as they ate. "As for me," said Hector de Bizan, "I know that M. de Saint Malini was wrong, and that had I been Ernington de Comminges, M. de Saint Malini would be at this moment stretched on the ground instead of sitting here." Saint Mullen looked at him furiously. "Oh, I mean what I say," continued he. "And stay, there is someone at the door who appears to agree with me." All turned at this, and saw Ernington standing in the doorway, looking very pale. He descended from the step as the statue of the commander from his pedestal, and walked straight up to Saint Malini, firmly but quietly. At this sight, several voices cried, "Come here, Ernington. Come this side, Comminges. There is room here." "Thank you," replied the young man, "but it is near M. de Saint Malini that I wish to sit." Saint Malini rose, and all eyes were fixed on him. But as he rose, his face changed its expression. "I will make room for you, monsieur," said he, gently, and in doing so addressed to you my frank and sincere apologies for my stupid aggression just now. I was drunk, forgive me. This declaration did not satisfy Ernington, but the cries of joy that proceeded from all the rest decided him to say no more, although a glance at Saint Malini showed him that he was not to be trusted. Saint Malini's glass was full, and he filled Ernington's. "Peace, peace," cried all the voices. Comminges profited by the noise, and leaning towards Saint Malini, with a smile on his lips, so that no one might suspect the sense of what he was saying, whispered, "M. de Saint Malini, this is the second time that you have insulted me without giving me satisfaction. Take care, for the third offense I will kill you like a dog." And the two mortal enemies touched glasses as though they had been the best friends. Chapter 59. What was passing in the mysterious house? While the hotel of the brave Chevalier, the abode, apparently, of the most perfect concord, with closed doors and open cellars, showed through the openings of the shutters the light of its candles and the mirth of its guests, an unaccustomed movement took place in that mysterious house of which our readers have as yet only seen the outside. The servant was going from one room to another, carrying packages which he placed in a trunk. These preparations over, he loaded a pistol, examined his poniard, then suspended it, by the aid of a ring, to the chain which served him for a belt, to which he attached besides a bunch of keys and a book of prayers bound in black leather. While he was thus occupied, a step, light as of a shadow, came up the staircase, and a woman, pale and phantom-like under the folds of a white veil, appeared at the door, and a voice, sad and sweet as the song of a bird in the wood, said, "Remy, are you ready?" "Yes, madam, I only wait for your box." "Do you think these boxes will go easily on our horses?" No. Remy, take all that you want for the journey." "Oh, Remy, I long to be with my father. I have sad presentiments, and it seems an age since I saw him." "And yet, madam, it is but 3 months, not a longer interval than usual." "Remy, you are such a good doctor, and you yourself told me, the last time we quitted him, that he had not long to live." "Yes, doubtless, but it was only a dread, not a prediction. Sometimes death seems to forget old men, and they live on as though by the habit of living. And often, besides, an old man is like a child, ill today and well tomorrow." Remy did not reply, for he had nothing really reassuring to say, and silence succeeded for some minutes. "At what hour have you ordered the horses?" said the lady at last. "At 2 o'clock. And one has just struck." "Yes, madam. No one is watching outside. No one. Not even that unhappy young man. Not even he." And Remy sighed. "You say that in a strange manner, Remy. Because he also has made a resolution." "What is it?" "To see us no more. At least, not to try to see us any more." "And where is he going?" "Where we are all going, to rest." "God give it him eternally," said the lady in a cold voice. "And yet—" "Yet what, madam? Had he nothing to do here? He had to love if he had been loved. A man of his name, rank, and age should think of his future. You, madam, are of an age, rank, and name little inferior to his, and you do not look forward to a future." "Yes, Remy, I do," cried she, with a sudden flashing of the eyes. "But listen, is that not the trot of a horse that I hear?" "Yes, I think so." "Can it be ours?" "It is possible, but it is an hour too soon." "It stops at the door, Remy." Remy ran down and arrived just as 3 hurried blows were struck on the door. "Who is there?" said he. "I," replied a trembling voice. "I, Grandchamp, the Baron's valet." "Ah, mon Dieu, Grandchamp, you at Paris. Speak low. Whence do you come?" "From Mirador." "Alas, damn Remy." "Well," cried the lady from the top of the stairs, "are they our horses, Remy?" "No, madam, it is not them." "What is it, Grandchamp?" "You do not guess." "Remy," cried she again, "you are talking to someone." "Yes, madam." "I thought I knew the voice." "Indeed, madam." She now descended, saying, "Who is there, Grandchamp?" "Yes, madam, it is I," replied the old man sadly, uncovering his white head. "Grandchamp, you— Oh, mon Dieu, my presentiments were right. My father is dead." "Indeed, madam, Marguerite has no longer a master." Pale, but motionless and firmly, the lady listened. Remy went to her and took her hand softly. "How did he die? Tell me, my friend," said she. "Madame M. le Baron, who could no longer leave his armchair, was struck a week ago by an attack of apoplexy. He muttered your name for the last time, then ceased to speak, and soon was no more." Diana went up again without another word. Her room was on the first story and looked only into a courtyard. The furniture was sombre, but rich. The hangings, in Arras tapestry, represented the death of our Savior, a prie-dieu and stool in carved oak, a bed with twisted columns, and tapestries like the walls, were the sole ornaments of the room. Not a flower, no gilding, but in a frame of black was contained a portrait of a man, before which the lady now knelt down, with dry eyes, but a sad heart. She fixed on this picture a long look of indescribable love. It represented a young man about 28, lying half naked on a bed. From his wounded breast the blood still flowed. His right hand hung mutilated, and yet it still held a broken sword. His eyes were closed as though he were about to die. Paleness and suffering gave to his face that divine character, which the faces of mortals assume only at the moment of quitting life for eternity. Under the portrait, in letters red as blood, was written, "Aut Caesar aut Nihil." The lady extended her arm, and spoke as though it could hear her. "I had begged thee to wait, although thy soul must have thirsted for vengeance, and as the dead see all, thou hast seen, my love, that I lived only not to kill my father, else I would have died after you. And then, you know, on your bleeding corpse I uttered a vow to give death for death, blood for blood, but I would not do it while the old man called me his innocent child. Thou hast waited, beloved, and now I am free. The last tie which bound me to earth is broken. I am all yours, and now I am free to come to you." She rose on one knee, kissed the hand, and then went on, I can weep no more. My tears have dried up in weeping over your tomb. In a few months I shall rejoin you, and you then will reply to me, Dear shade, to whom I have spoken so often without reply. Diana then rose, and seating herself in a chair, muttered, Poor father, and then fell into a profound reverie. At last she called Remy. The faithful servant soon appeared. Here I am, madam, my worthy friend, my brother, you, the last person who knows me on this earth, say adieu to me. Why so, madam? Because the time has come for us to separate. Separate, cried the young man. What do you mean, madam? Yes, Remy. My project of vengeance seemed to me noble and pure while there remained an obstacle between me and it, and I only contemplated it from afar off. But now that I approach the execution of it, now that the obstacle has disappeared, I do not draw back, but I do not wish to drag with me into crime a generous and pure soul like yours. Therefore you must quit me, my friend. Remy listened to the words of Diana with a somber look. Madam, replied he, do you think you are speaking to a trembling old man? Madam, I am but 26, and snatched as I was from a tomb, if I still live, it is for the accomplishment of some terrible action, to play an active part in the work of Providence. Never. Then separate your thoughts from mine, since we both have the same thoughts, sinister as they may be. Where you go, I will go. What you do, I will aid in, or if, in spite of my prayers, you persist in dismissing me. Oh, murmured she, dismiss you? What a word. Remy. If you persist in that resolution, continued the young man, I know what I have to do, and all for me will end with 2 blows from a poniard, one in the heart of him whom you know, and the other in your own. Remy, Remy, cried Diana, do not say that. The life of him you threaten does not belong to you. It is mine. I have paid for it dearly enough. I swear to you, Remy, that on the day on which I knelt beside the dead body of him, and she pointed to the portrait, on that day I approached my lips to that open wound, and the trembling lips seemed to say to me, Avenge me, Diana, avenge me. Madam, therefore, I repeat, vengeance is for me, and not for you. Besides, for whom and through whom did he die? By me and through me. I must obey you, madam, for I also was left for dead. Who carried me away from the middle of the corpses with which that room was filled? You. Who cured me of my wounds? You. Who concealed me? You always. Order, then, and I will obey, provided that you do not order me to leave you. So be it. Remy, you are right. Nothing ought to separate us more. Remy pointed to the portrait. Now, madam, said he was killed by treason. It is by treason that he must be revenged. Ah, you do not know one thing. The hand of God is with us. For tonight I have found the secret of the aqua tofana, that poison of the Medicis and of René the Florentine. Really? Come and see, madam. But where's Grandchamp? The poor old man has come 60 leagues on horseback. He is tired out, and has fallen asleep on my bed. Come, then, said Diana, and she followed Remy. Chapter 60. The Laboratory. Remy led the lady into a neighboring room, and pushing a spring which was hidden under board in the floor, and which, opening, disclosed a straight dark staircase, gave his hand to Diana to help her to descend. 20 steps of this staircase, or rather ladder, led into a dark and circular cave, whose only furniture was a stove with an immense hearth, a square table, 2 rush chairs, and a quantity of files and iron boxes. In the stove a dying fire still gleamed, while a thick black smoke escaped through a pipe fastened into the wall. From a steel place in the hearth a few drops of a liquid, yellow as gold, was dropping into a thick white phial. Diana looked round her without astonishment or terror. The ordinary feelings of life seemed to be unknown to her who lived only in the tomb. Remy lighted a lamp, and then approached a well hollowed out in the cave, attached a bucket to a long cord, let it down into the well, and then drew it up full of a water as cold as ice and as clear as crystal. Approach, madam, said he. Diana drew near. In the bucket he let fall a single drop of the liquid contained in the phial, and the entire mass of the water became instantaneously yellow. Then the color evaporated, and the water in 10 minutes became as clear as before. Remy looked at her. "Well," said she. "Well, madam," said he, "now dip in that water, which is neither smell nor color, a glove or a handkerchief. Soak it in scented soap. Pour some of it into the basin where you are about to wash your hands or face, and you will see, as was seen at the court of Charles IX, the flower killed by its perfume, the glove poisoned by its contact, the soap killed by its introduction into the pores of the skin. Pour a single drop of this pure oil on the wick of a lamp or candle, and for an hour the candle or lamp will exhale death and burn at the same time like any other. You are sure of what you say. Remy, all this I have tried. See these birds who can now neither drink nor eat. They have drunk of water like this. See this goat who has browsed on grass watered with this same water. He moves and totters. Vainly now should we restore him to life and liberty. His life is forfeited, unless, indeed, nature should reveal to his instinct some of those antidotes of poison which animals know, although men do not. Can I see this phial, Remy? Yes, madam, presently. Remy then separated it from the still with infinite care, then corked it with soft wax, tied the top up in cloth, and then presented it to Diana. She took it, held it up to the light, and, after looking at it, said, "It will do. When the time arrives, we will choose gloves, lamp, soap, or flowers, as convenient. Will the liquor keep in metal? It eats it away. But then, perhaps, the bottle will break. I think not. See the thickness of the crystal. Besides, we can shut it up in a covering of gold. Listen, Remy, I hear horses. I think ours have arrived. Probably, madam, it is about the time, but I will go and send them away." "Why so? Are they not useless? Instead of going to Mirador, we will go into Flanders. Keep the horses." "But, Grandchamp, what can we do with him?" said he. "He has need of repose. He shall remain here, and sell this house, which we require no longer, but restore to liberty that unhappy animal, whom you were forced to torture. As you say, God may care for its recovery. This furnace, and these stills, leave them here. But these powders, essences, and acids, throw them in the fire. Remy, go away, then, or put on this glass mask." Then, taking similar precautions for himself, he blew up the fire again, poured in the powder, which went off in brilliant sparks, some green and some yellow, and the essences, which, instead of being consumed, mounted like serpents of fire into the pipe, with a noise like distant thunder. "Now," said Remy, "if anyone now discovers this cave, he will only think that an alchemist has been here, and though they still burn sorcerers, they respect alchemists. And besides," said the lady, "if they do burn us, provided I have only finished my task, I should not mind that sort of death more than any other." At this moment they heard knocking. "Here are our horses, madam," said Remy. "Go up quickly, and I will close the trapdoor." Diana obeyed, and found Grandchamp, whom the noise had awakened, at the door. The old man was not a little surprised to hear of his mistress's intended departure, who informed him of it without telling him where she was going. "Grandchamp, my friend," said she, "Remy and I are going to accomplish a pilgrimage on which we have long determined. Speak of this journey to none, and do not mention my name to anyone." "Oh, I promise you, madam," replied the old servant, "but we shall see you again." "Doubtless, Grandchamp, if not in this world, in the next. But, apropos, Grandchamp, this house is now useless to us." Diana drew from a drawer a bundle of papers. "Here are the title deeds. Let us sell this house. But if, in the course of a month, you do not find a purchaser, abandon it and return to Mirador. But if I find someone, how much am I to ask?" "What you please, Grandchamp." "Shall I take the money to Mirador?" "Keep it for yourself, my good Grandchamp." "What, madam, such a sum?" "Yes, I owe it to you for your services, and I have my father's debts to pay as well as my own. Now, adieu." Then Diana went upstairs, cut the picture from a frame, rolled it up, and placed it in her trunk. When Remy had tied the 2 trunks with leather thongs, and had glanced into the street to see that there were no lookers on, he aided his mistress to mount. "I believe, madam," said he, "that this is the last house in which we shall live so long. The last but one, Remy. And what will be the other? The tomb, Remy." Chapter 61. What Monseigneur Francois, Duc d'Anjou, Duc de Brabant and Comte de Flanders, was doing in Flanders. Our readers must now permit us to leave the King at the Louvre, Henri of Navarre at Cahors, Caillebotte on the road, and Diana in the street, to go to Flanders to find M. le Duc d'Anjou, recently named Duc de Brabant, and to whose aid we have sent the great Admiral of France, and Duc de Jeux, at 80 leagues from Paris, toward the north. The sound of French voices was heard, and the French banner floated over a French camp on the banks of the Scheldt. It was night. The fires, disposed in an immense circle, bordered the stream, and were reflected in its deep waters. From the top of the ramparts of the town the sentinels saw shining, by the bivouac fires, the muskets of the French army. This army was of the Duc d'Anjou. What he had come to do there we must tell our readers, and although it may not be very amusing, yet we hope they will pardon it in consideration of the warning. So many people are dull without announcing it. Those of our readers who have read Caillebotte already know the Duc d'Anjou, that jealous, egotistical, ambitious prince, and who, born so near to the throne, had never been able to wait with resignation until death offered him a free passage to it. Thus he had desired the throne of Navarre under Charles IX, then that of Charles IX, himself, then that of his brother Henri III. For a time he had turned his eyes toward England, then governed by a woman, and to possess this throne he was ready to have married this woman, although she was Elizabeth and was 20 years older than himself. In this plan destiny was beginning to smile on him, and he saw himself in the favor of a great queen, until then inaccessible to all human affections. Besides this, a crown was offered to him in Flanders. He had seen his brother Henri embarrassed in his quarrel with the Guises, but had soon discovered that they had no other aim than that of substituting themselves for the Valois. He had then separated himself from them, although not without danger. Besides, Henri III had at last opened his eyes, and the Duke exiled, or something like it, had retired to Amboise. It was then that the Flemings opened their arms to him. Tired of Spanish rule, decimated by the Duc d'Elva, deceived by the false peace of John of Austria, who had profited by it to retake Namur and Chalmont, the Flemings had called in William of Nassau, Prince of Orange, and had made him Governor-General of Brabant. A few words about this man, who held so great a place in history, but who will only be named here. William of Nassau was then about 50. He was the son of William called the Old, and of Julienne de Stolbeck, cousin of that René of Nassau killed at the siege of Dizia. He had from his youth been brought up in principles of reform, and had a full consciousness of the greatness of his mission. This mission, which he believed he had received from heaven, and for which he died like a martyr, was to found the Republic of Holland, in which he was successful. When very young, he had been called by Charles V to his court. Charles was a good judge of men, and often the old emperor, who supported the heaviest burden ever borne by an imperial hand, consulted the child on the most delicate matters connected with the politics of Holland. The young man was scarcely 24 when Charles confided to him, in the absence of the famous Philibert Emmanuel Savoy, the command of the army in Flanders. William showed himself worthy of this high confidence. He held in check the Duc de Nevis and Coligny, 2 of the greatest captains of the time, and under their eyes fortified Philippeville and Chalmont. On the day when Charles V abdicated, it was on William of Nassau that he leaned to descend the steps of the throne, and he it was who was charged to carry to Ferdinand the imperial throne which Charles had resigned. Then came Philippe too, and in spite of his father's recommendations to him to regard William as a brother, the latter soon found a great difference. This strengthened in his mind the great idea of freeing Holland and Flanders, which he might never have endeavored to carry into effect if the old emperor, his friend, had remained on the throne. Holland, by his advice, demanded the dismissal of the foreign troops, and then began the bloody struggle of the Spaniards to retain the prey which was escaping from them, and then passed over this unhappy people the viceroyalty of Marguerite of Austria and the bloody consulship of the Duc d'Elva, and then was organized its struggle, at once political and religious, which began with the protest of the Hotel Culemborg, which demanded the abolition of the Inquisition in Holland, and when 400 gentlemen, walking in pays, carried to the foot of Marguerite's throne the general desire of the people, as summed up in that protest. At the sight of these gentlemen, so simply clothed, Ballemont, one of the councillors of the Duchess, uttered the word guerre, which, taken up by the Flemish gentlemen, so long designated the Patriot party. From this time William began to play the part, which made him one of the greatest political actors of the world. Constantly beaten by the overwhelming power of Philippe II, he constantly rose again, always stronger after his defeats, always organizing a new army to replace the scattered one, and always hailed as a liberator. In the midst of these alternate moral triumphs and physical defeats, William learned at Mons the news of the massacre of St. Bartholomew. It was a terrible wound for Holland, and the Calvinist portion of Flanders lost by it their natural allies, the Huguenots of France. William retreated from Mons to the Rhine and waited for events. Some of the guerre was driven by a contrary wind into the Port of Brill, and seeing no escape, and pushed by despair, took the city which was preparing to hang them. This done, they chased away the Spanish garrison, and sent for the Prince of Orange. He came, and as he wished to strike a decisive blow, he published an ordinance forbidding the Catholic religion in Holland, as the Protestant faith was forbidden in France. At this manifesto, war recommenced. The Duc d'Elva sent his own son Frederick against the revolters, who took from him Zutphen, Naarden, and Haarlem, but this check, far from discouraging them, seemed to give him new strength. All took up arms, from the Zuiderzee to the Scheldt. Spain began to tremble, recalled the Duc d'Elva, and sent as his successor Louis de Requesens, one of the conquerors, at Lepanto. Then began for William a new series of misfortunes. Ludovic and Henri of Nassau, who were bringing him aid, were surprised by one of the officers of Don Louis Ninemeg, defeated and killed. The Spaniards penetrated into Holland, besieged Leiden, and pillaged Antwerp. All seemed desperate, when heaven came once more to the aid of the infant republic. Requesens died at Brussels. Then all the provinces, united by a common interest, drew up and signed, on the 8th of November, 1576, that is to say 4 days after the sack of Antwerp, the treaty known under the name of the Treaty of Ghent, by which they engaged to aid each other in delivering their country from a yoke of the Spaniards and other foreigners. Don John reappeared, and with him the woes of Holland. For in less than 2 months Namur and Chalmont were taken. The Flemings replied, however, to these 2 checks by naming the Prince of Orange Governor-General of Brabant. Don John died in his turn, and Alexander Farnese succeeded him. He was a clever prince, charming in his manners, which were at once gentle and firm, a skillful politician, and a good general. Flanders trembled at hearing that soft Italian voice call a friend, instead of treating her as a rebel. William knew that Farnese would do more for Spain with his promises than the Duc d'Elva with his punishments. On the 29th of January, 1579, he made the provinces sign the Treaty of Utrecht, which was the fundamental base of the rights of Holland. It was then that, fearing he should never be able to accomplish alone the freedom for which he had been fighting for 15 years, he offered to the Duc d'Anjou the sovereignty of the country, on condition that he should respect their privileges and their liberty of conscience. This was a terrible blow to Philippe II, and he replied to it by putting a price of 25,000 crowns on the head of William. The States General assembled at The Hague, then declared Philippe deposed from the sovereignty of Holland, and ordered that henceforth the oath of fidelity should be taken to them. The Duc d'Anjou now entered Belgium, and was well received. Philippe's promise, however, bore its fruits, for in the midst of a fete, a pistol shot was heard. William fell, and was believed dead, but he recovered. The shot had been fired by Jean Jolguy. The Flemings then, on William's advice, elected Francois, Duke of Brabant, sovereign Prince of Flanders. Elizabeth of England saw in this a method of reuniting the Calvinists of Flanders and France to those of England. Perhaps she dreamed of a triple crown. William, however, took care to hold the Duc d'Anjou in check, and to counteract the execution of any design which would have given him too much power in Flanders. Philippe II, called the Duc de Guise to his aid, on the strength of a treaty which had been entered into by him with Don John of Austria. Henri of Guise consented, and it was then that Lorraine and Spain sent Salcede to the Duc d'Anjou to assassinate him, which would have suited the views of both. But Salcede, as we know, was arrested and executed without having carried his project into execution. Francois advanced but slowly, however, in Flanders, for the people were more than half afraid of him. He grew impatient and determined to lay siege to Antwerp, which had invited his aid against Venise, but when he wished to end had turned its guns against him. This was the position of the Duc d'Anjou at the time when our story rejoins him, on the day after the arrival of Joves and his fleet. Chapter 62. Preparations for battle. The camp of the new Duke of Brabant was situated on the banks of the Scheldt, and the army, although well disciplined, was agitated by a spirit easy to understand. Indeed, many Calvinists assisted the Duke, not from sympathy for him, but in order to be as disagreeable as possible to Spain and to the Catholics of France and England. They fought rather from self-love than from conviction or devotion, and it was certain that, the campaign once over, they would abandon their leader or impose conditions on him. With regard to these conditions, the Duke always gave him to understand that when the time came he should be ready, and was constantly saying, Henri of Navarre made himself a Catholic. Why should not become a Huguenot? On the opposite side, on the contrary, there existed a perfect unity of feeling. Antwerp had intended to give entrance to him at her own time and on her own conditions. All at once they saw a fleet appear at the mouth of the Scheldt, and they learned that this fleet was brought by the High Admiral of France to aid the Duc d'Anjou, whom they now began to look upon as their enemy. The Calvinists of the Duke were little better pleased than the Flemings at the sight. They were very brave, but very jealous, and they did not wish others to come and clip their laurels, particularly swords which had slain so many Huguenots on the day of the street Bartholomew. From this proceeded many quarrels, which began on the very evening of their arrival, and continued all the next day. From their ramparts, the Antwerpians had every day the spectacle of a dozen duels between Catholics and Protestants, and they threw into the river as many dead as a combat might have cost the French. If the siege of Antwerp, like that of Troy, had lasted 9 years, the besieged need have done nothing but look at the assailants, who would certainly have destroyed themselves. Francois acted the part of mediator, but not without great difficulty. He had made promises to the Huguenots, and could not offend them without offending at the same time all Flanders. On the other hand, to offend the Catholics sent by the king to aid him would be most impolitic. The arrival of this reinforcement, on which the Duke himself had not reckoned, filled the Spaniards and the Guises with rage. However, all these different opinions interfered sadly with the discipline of the Duke's army. Joyeuse, who we know had never liked the mission, was annoyed to find among these men such antagonistic opinions, and felt instinctively that the time for success was past, and both as an idle courtier and as a captain, grumbled at having come so far only to meet with defeat. He declared loudly that the Duc d'Anjou had been wrong in laying siege to Antwerp, and argued that to possess a great city with its own consent was a real advantage, but that to take by assault the second capital of his future states was to expose himself to the dislike of the Flemings, and Joyeuse knew the Flemings too well not to feel sure that if the Duke did take Antwerp, sooner or later they would revenge themselves with usury. This opinion Joyeuse did not hesitate to declare in the Duke's tent. While the council was held among his captains, the Duke was lying on a couch and listening, not to the advice of the admiral, but to the whispers of Aurelie. This man, by his cowardly compliances, his base flatteries, and his continual assiduities, had secured the favor of the prince. With his lute, his love messages, and his exact information about all the persons and all the intrigues of the court, with skillful maneuvers for drawing into the prince's net whatever prey he might wish for, he had made a large fortune, while he remained to all appearance the poor lute player. His influence was immense, because it was secret. Joyeuse, seeing the Duke talking to Aurelie, stopped short. The Duke, who had, after all, been paying more attention than he seemed to do, asked him what was the matter. Nothing, Monseigneur. I am only waiting until your Highness is at liberty to listen to me. Oh, but I do listen, M. de Joyeuse. Do you think I cannot listen to 2 people at once, when Caesar dictated 7 letters at a time? Monseigneur, said Joyeuse, with a glance at the musician. "I am no singer to need an accompaniment when I speak." "Very good. Duke, be quiet, orally. Then you disapprove of a coup de main on Antwerp." "Yes, Monseigneur. I adopted this plan in council, however. Therefore, Monseigneur, I speak with much hesitation after so many distinguished captains." And Joes, courtier-like, bowed to all. Many voices were instantly raised to agree with the admiral. "Comte de Saint-Aignan," said the prince to one of his bravest colonels, "you are not of the opinion of M. de Jews?" "Yes, Monseigneur, Oh, I thought as you made a grimace." Everyone laughed but Joes, who said, "If M. de Saint-Aignan generally gives his advice in that manner, it is not very polite, that is all." "M. de Jews," replied Saint-Aignan, "His Highness is wrong to reproach me with an infirmity contracted in his service. At the taking of Cucumbrasis, I received a blow on the head, and since that time my face is subject to nervous contractions, which occasion those grimaces of which His Highness complains. This is not an excuse that I give you, M. de Jews. It is an explanation," said the Count, proudly. "No, monsieur," said Jews, "it is a reproach that you make, and you are right." The blood mounted to the face of Duc Francois. "And to whom is this reproach addressed?" said he. "To me, probably, Monseigneur." "Why should Saint-Aignan reproach you, whom he does not know?" "Because I believe for a moment that M. de Saint-Aignan cared so little for your Highness as to counsel you to assault Antwerp. But," cried the prince, "I must settle my position in the country. I am Duke of Brabant and Count of Flanders, in name, and I must be so in reality. This William, who is gone I know not where, spoke to me of a kingdom. Where is this kingdom? In Antwerp. Where is he? Probably in Antwerp also. Therefore we must take Antwerp, and we shall know how we stand." "Oh, Monseigneur, you know it now, or you are, in truth, a worse politician than I thought you. Who counseled you to take Antwerp? The Prince of Orange. Who disappeared at the moment of taking the field? The Prince of Orange. Who, while he made your Highness Duke of Brabant, reserved for himself the lieutenant generalship of the duchy. The Prince of Orange. Whose interest is it to ruin the Spaniards by you, and you by the Spaniards? The Prince of Orange. Who will replace you? Who will succeed, if he does not do so already? The Prince of Orange. Oh, Monseigneur, in following his counsels you have but annoyed the Flemings. Let a reverse come, and all those who do not dare to look you now in the face will run after you like those timid dogs who run after those who fly." "What? You imagine that I can be beaten by wool merchants and beer drinkers? These wool merchants and these beer drinkers have given plenty to do to Philippe de Valois, the Emperor Charles V, and Philippe II, who were 3 princes placed sufficiently high, Monseigneur, for the comparison not to be disagreeable to you. Then you fear repulse?" "Yes, Monseigneur, I do." "You will not be there, M. de Jews." "Why not?" "Because you can hardly have such doubts of your own bravery as already to see yourself flying before the Flemings. In any case, reassure yourself. These prudent merchants have the habit, when they march to battle, of cumbering themselves with such heavy armor that they would never catch you if you did run." "Monseigneur, I do not doubt my own courage. I shall be in the front, but I shall be beaten there, as the others who are behind will be." "But your reasoning is not logical, M. de Jews. You approve of my taking the lesser places." "I approve of your taking those that do not defend themselves. And then I am to draw back from the great city because she talks of defending herself. Better than to march on to destruction. Well, I will not retreat. Your Highness must do as you like, and we are here to obey. Prove to me that I am wrong." "Monseigneur, see the army of the Prince of Orange. It was yours, was it not? Well, instead of sitting down before Antwerp with you, it is in Antwerp, which is very different. William, you say, was your friend and counselor, and now you not only do not know where he is, but you believe him to be changed into an enemy. See the Flemings. When you arrived, they were pleased to see you. Now they shut their gates at your sight, and prepare their cannon at your approach, not less than if you were the Duc d'Alva. Well, I tell you, Flemings and Dutch, Antwerp and Orange, only wait for an opportunity to unite against you, and that opportunity will be when you order your artillery to fire. Well, we will fight at once, Flemings and Dutch, Antwerp and Orange. No, Monseigneur, we are but just men enough to attack Antwerp, supposing we have only the inhabitants to deal with, and while we are engaged in the assault, William will fall on us with his eternal 8,000 or 10,000 men, always destroyed and always reappearing by the aid of which he has kept in check during 10 or 12 years the Duc d'Alva, Requesens, and the Duc de Parma. Then you persist in thinking that we shall be beaten. I do. Well, it is easy for you to avoid it, M. de Jews, said the prince angrily. My brother sent you here to aid me, but I may dismiss you, saying that I do not need aid. Your Highness may say so, but I would not retire on the eve of a battle. Well, my dear Admiral, said the Duke, trying to conciliate, I may have been too jealous of the honor of my name, and wished too much to prove the superiority of the French army, and I may have been wrong. But the evil is done. We are before armed men, before men who now refuse what they themselves offered. Am I to yield to them? Tomorrow they would begin to retake, bit by bit, what I have already conquered. No, the sword is drawn. Let us strike, or they will strike first. That is my opinion. When your Highness speaks thus, said Jews, I will say no more. I am here to obey you, and will do so with all my heart, whether you lead me to death or victory. And yet, but I will say no more. Speak. No, I have said enough. No, I wish to hear. In private, then, if it please your Highness. All rose and retired to the other end of the spacious tent. Speak, said Francois. Monseigneur may care little for a check from Spain, a check which will render triumphant those drinkers of Flemish beer, or this double-faced Prince of Orange. But will you bear so patiently the laughter of M. de Guise? Francois frowned. What has M. de Guise to do with it? Said he. M. de Guise tried to have you assassinated, Monseigneur. Salcede confessed at the torture, and, if I mistake not, he plays a great part in all this, and he will be delighted to see you receive a check before Antwerp, or even perhaps to obtain, for nothing, that death of a son of France, for which he had promised to pay so dearly to Salcede. Read the history of Flanders, Monseigneur, and you will see that the Flemings are in the habit of enriching their soil with the blood of princes and of the best French warriors. The Duke shook his head. Well, Jews, said he, I will give, if it must be, the cursed joy to the Lorraines of seeing me dead, but not that of seeing me flying. I thirst for glory, Jews, for alone of all my name I have still my battles to win. You forget Cateau Cambresis, Monseigneur. Compare that with Jarnac and Montcontour, Jews. Then, turning to the others, who were standing far off, he said, Gentlemen, the assault is still resolved on. The rain has ceased. The ground is good. We will make the attack this night. Joes bowed. Will your Highness give full directions? We wait for them. Said he, You have 8 vessels, without counting the admiralship. Have you not M. de Jews? Yes, Monseigneur. You will force the line. The thing will be easy. The Antwerpians have only merchant vessels in the port. Then you will bring them to bear upon the fort. Then, if the quay is defended, you will attempt a landing with your 1,500 men. Of the rest of the army I will make 2 columns, one commanded by M. de Saint-Aignan, the other by myself. Both will attempt an escalade by surprise, at the moment when the first cannon shot is fired. The cavalry will remain in position, in case of a repulse, to protect the retreating columns. Of these 3 attacks, one must surely succeed. The first column which gains the ramparts will fire a rocket to let the others know. But one must think of everything, Monseigneur, said Jeus, and supposing all 3 attacks should fail, then we must gain the vessels under the protection of our batteries. All bowed. Now, gentlemen, silence, said the Duke. Wake the sleeping troops and embark, but let not a shot reveal our design. You will be in the port, Admiral, before the Antwerpians suspect your intention, we shall go along the left bank, and shall arrive at the same time as yourself. Go, gentlemen, and good courage. Our former good luck will not fail to follow us over the Scheldt. The captains quitted the prince's tent, and gave their orders with the indicated precautions. Chapter 63. Monseigneur, however, the Antwerpians did not quietly see the hostile preparations of the Duc d'Anjou, and Jules was not wrong in attributing to them all the enmity possible. Antwerp was like a beehive at night, calm on the exterior, but within full of movement and murmur. The Flemings and armed patrolled the streets, barricaded their houses, and fraternized with the battalions of the Prince of Orange, of whom part were already in garrison there, while the other part entered the city in fractions. When all was ready for a vigorous defense, the Prince of Orange, on a dark and moonless night, entered the city quietly and went to the Hôtel de Ville, where his confidants had everything ready for his reception. They received all the deputies of the bourgeoisie, passed and reviewed the officers of the paid troops, and communicated his plans to them, the chief of which was to profit by this movement of the Duc d'Anjou to break with him. The Duke had done just what William wished to bring him to, and he saw with pleasure this new competitor for the sovereignty ruin himself, like so many others. William would have taken the offensive, but the governor objected, and determined to wait for the arrival of Monseigneur. 9 o'clock in the evening sounded, and the uncertainty became real anxiety, some scouts having protested that they had seen a movement in the French camp. A little flatboat had been sent on the Scheldt to reconnoiter, for the Antwerpians were less unquiet as to what would occur by land and by sea, but the bark had not returned. William became more and more impatient, when the door of the hall opened, and a valet appeared and announced Monseigneur. As he spoke, a man, tall and imperious-looking, wearing with supreme grace a cloak which entirely enveloped him, entered the hall, and saluted courteously those who were there. But at the first glance, his eye, proud and piercing, sought out the prince in the midst of his officers. He went straight up to him and offered him his hand, which the prince pressed with affection and almost with respect. They called each other Monseigneur. After this, the unknown took off his cloak. He was dressed in a buff doublet and had high leather boots. He was armed with a long sword, which seemed to make part of himself, so easily it hung, and with a little dagger, which was passed through his belt. His boots were covered with mud and dust, and his spurs were red with the blood of his horse. He took his place at the table. "Well, where are we?" asked he. "Monseigneur," replied William, "you must have seen, in coming here, that the streets were barricaded." "I saw that, and the houses loopholed." "I did not see that, but it is a good plan." "And the sentries doubled." "Does not Monseigneur approve of these preparations for defense?" said a voice, in a tone of anxious disappointment. "Yes, but, however, I do not believe that in our circumstances it will be useful. It fatigues the soldier and disquiets the bourgeois. You have a plan of attack and defense, I suppose?" "We waited to communicate them to Monseigneur," said the burgomaster. "Speak then." "Monseigneur arrived rather late, and I was obliged to act meanwhile," said William. "And you did right, Monseigneur. Besides, whatever you do well. But I have not lost my time on the road, either." "We know by our spies," said the burgomaster, "that a movement is preparing in the French camp. They are making ready for an attack, but as we do not know on which side it will come, we have disposed the guns so that they may be equally distributed over the whole rampart." "That is wise," replied the unknown, with a slight smile to William, who held his tongue and let the bourgeois speak of war. "We have done the same with our civic guards. They are spread over the whole wall, and have orders to run at once to the point of attack. However, it is the opinion of the greater number of our members that it is impossible that the French meditate anything but a feigned attack." "And what purpose would that serve?" "To intimidate us and induce us to admit them amicably." The stranger looked again at the Prince of Orange, who listened to all this in the most careless manner, which almost amounted to disdain. "However," said another voice, "some fancied they could distinguish preparations for attack in the camp this evening." "Mere suspicions," said the burgomaster. "I examined the camp myself with an excellent spyglass." The men were preparing for sleep, and the Duke was dining in his tent. The unknown threw a new glance at the prince, and fancied that this time he gave a slight smile. "Gentlemen," said the unknown, "you are in error. A regular assault is preparing against you, and your plans, however good, are incomplete." "But, Monseigneur—" "Incomplete in this, that you expect an attack and are prepared to meet it." "Certainly." "Well, it is you who will make the attack, not wait for it, if you will trust me." "Ah!" cried William, "that is something like speaking." "At this moment," said the stranger, who saw that he might reckon on the prince's support, "the ships of M. de Juice are getting ready." "How do you know that, Monseigneur?" cried many voices together. "I know it," replied he. A murmur of doubt was half uttered, but the stranger caught it. "Do you doubt it?" asked he, in the tone of a man accustomed to control all fears, prejudices, and self-loves. "We do not doubt it if your highness says it, but if you will permit us to observe." "Speak." "That if it were so we should have had tidings of it." "How so?" "By our spies." Chapter 64. Monseigneur. At this moment another man entered the hall, and came forward respectfully. "Ah, it is you, my friend," said the burgomaster. "Myself, monsieur," replied the man. "Monseigneur," said the burgomaster, "it is a man whom we sent to reconnoiter." At the word Monseigneur, addressed not to the Prince of Orange, the newcomer made a movement of surprise and joy, and advanced quickly to see better who was designated by this title. He was one of those Flemish sailors, of whom the type is so recognizable, being marked, a square head, blue eyes, short neck, and broad shoulders. He crushed in his large hands his woolen cap, and as he advanced he left behind him a line of wet, for his clothes were dripping with water. "Oh, here is a brave man who has swum back," said Monseigneur, looking at the man with his accustomed air of authority. "Yes, Monseigneur, yes, and the skelt is broad and rapid," said the sailor, eagerly. "Speak, goes, speak," said Monseigneur, knowing how a sailor would prize being thus called by his name. Thus from that minute Goes addressed himself to the unknown exclusively, although, having been sent by another, it was to him that he should have given an account of his mission. "Monseigneur," said he, "I set out in my smallest bark and passed, by giving the word, through all our ships, and reached those cursed French." "Ah, pardon, Monseigneur." The stranger smiled and said, "Never mind, I am but half French, so should be but half cursed." "Then Monseigneur pardons me." He nodded, and Goes went on. "While I rowed in the dark with my oars wrapped in cloth, I heard a voice crying, 'Hola, Bach, what do you want?' I thought it was to me that the question was addressed, and was about to reply something or other, when I heard someone cry behind me, 'Admiral's boat.'" Monseigneur looked at the council. "At the same moment," continued Gues, "I felt a shock, my bark was swamped, and I fell into the water, but the waves of the Scheldt knew me for an old acquaintance, and threw me up again. It was the Admiral's boat taking M. de Juice on board, and which had passed over me. God only knows how I was not crushed or drowned." "Thanks, brave Goes, thanks," said the Prince of Orange, putting a purse into his hand. However, the sailor seemed to wait for his dismissal from the stranger, who gave him a friendly nod, which he valued more than the prince's present. "Well," said Monseigneur to the burgomaster, "what do you say of this report? Do you still doubt that the French are preparing? And do you believe that it was to pass the night on board that M. de Juice was leaving the camp for his ship?" "But you are diviner, then, Monseigneur," cried the Bourgeois. "Not more than Monseigneur the Prince of Orange, who is in all things of my opinion, I am sure. But I, like him, was well informed, and know well those on the other side, so that I should have been much astonished had they not attacked tonight. Then be ready, gentlemen, for if you give them time, the attack will be serious." "These gentlemen will do me the justice to own," said the prince, "that before your arrival I held exactly the same language to them that you now do." "But," said the burgomaster, "why does Monseigneur believe that the attack is about to commence?" "Here are the probabilities. The infantry is Catholic. It will fight alone, that is, on one side. The cavalry is Calvinist. They will fight alone on another side. The navy is under Joves, from Paris, who will take his share of the combat and the glory. That is 3 sides. Then let us form 3 corps, said the burgomaster. Make only one, gentlemen, with all your best soldiers, and leave any of whom you may be doubtful in close fight to guard your walls. Then with this body make a vigorous sally when Francois least expects it. They mean to attack, let them be forestalled, and attack themselves. If you wait for their assault, you are lost. For no one equals the French in attack, as you, gentlemen, have no equals at defending your towns. The Flemings looked radiant. What did I say, gentlemen? Said William. It is a great honor, said the unknown, to have been, without knowing it, of the same opinion as the greatest captain of the age. Both bowed courteously. Then, continued the unknown, it is settled. You will make a furious sortie on the infantry and cavalry. I trust that your officers will so conduct it as to defeat your enemies. But their vessels, cried the burgomaster. The wind is northeast, and they will be in our city in 2 hours. You have yourselves 6 old ships and 30 boats at St. Marie. That is a mile off, is it not? That is your maritime barricade across the Scheldt. Yes, Monseigneur, that is so. How do you know all these details? Monseigneur smiled. I know them, as you see. It is there that lies the fate of the battle. Then, said the burgomaster, we must send aid to our brave seamen. On the contrary, you may dispose otherwise of the 400 men who are there. 20 brave, intelligent, and devoted men will suffice. The Antwerpians opened their eyes in surprise. Will you, continued Monseigneur, destroy the French fleet at the expense of your 6 old vessels and 30 boats? Hum, said the Antwerpians, looking at each other. Our ships are not so old. Well, prize them, said the stranger, and I will pay you their value. See, said William softly to him, the men against whom I have to contend every day. Were it not for that, I should have conquered long ago. Come, gentlemen, continued the stranger, name your price, but name it quickly. I will pay you in bills on yourselves, which I trust you will find good. Monseigneur, said the burgomaster, after a few minutes' deliberation with the others, we are merchants and not soldiers. Therefore, you must pardon some hesitation, for our souls are not in our bodies, but in our counting houses. However, there are circumstances in which, for the general good, we know how to make sacrifices. Dispose, then, of our ships as you like. Ma foi, Monseigneur, said William, you have done wonders. It would have taken me 6 months to obtain what you have done in 10 minutes. This, then, is my plan, gentlemen, said Monseigneur. The French, with the admiral's galley at their head, will try to force a passage. Make your line long enough, and from all your boats let the men throw grappling irons, and then, having made fast the enemy's ships, set fire to all your own boats, having previously filled them with combustible materials, and let your men escape in one reserved for the purpose. Oh, cried William, I see the whole French fleet burning. Yes, the whole. Then no more retreat by sea and none by land, for at the same time you must open the sluices of Malines, Bircham, Lyre, Duffel, and Antwerp, repulsed by you, pursued by your open dikes, enveloped on all sides by these waters unexpectedly and rapidly rising, by the sea, which will have a flow, but no ebb, the French will be drowned, overwhelmed, destroyed. The officers uttered a cry of joy. There is but one drawback, said the prince. What is it, Monseigneur? That it would take a day to send our orders to the different towns, and we have but an hour. And an hour is enough. But who will instruct the fleet? It is done. By whom? By me. If these gentlemen had refused to give it to me, I should have bought it. But Malines, Lyre, Duffel. I passed through Malines and Lyre, and sent a shore agent to Duffel. At 11 o'clock the French will be beaten. At 1 they will be in full retreat, At 2 Malines will open its dikes, lyre, and duffel their sluices, and the whole plain will become a furious ocean, which will drown houses, fields, woods, and villages. It is true, but at the same time will destroy the French so utterly that not one will return to France. A silence of admiration and terror followed these words. Then all at once the Flemings burst into applause. William stepped forward, and, holding out his hand, said, "Then, Monseigneur, all is ready on our side. All, and stay, I believe on the side of the French also." And he pointed to an officer who was entering. "Gentlemen," cried the officer, "we have just heard that the French are marching toward the city." "To arms," cried the burgomaster. "To arms," cried all. "One moment, gentlemen," cried Monseigneur. "I have to give one direction more important than all the rest." "Speak," cried all. "The French will be surprised. It will not be a combat, nor even a retreat, but a flight. To pursue them you must be lightly armed. No cuirasses, morbleu. It is your cuirasses, in which you cannot move, which have made you lose all the battles you have lost. No cuirasses, gentlemen. We will meet again in the combat. Meanwhile, go to the place of the Hôtel de Ville, where you will find all your men in battle array." "Thanks, Monseigneur," said William. "You have saved Belgium and Holland." "Prince, you overwhelm me." "Will your Highness consent to draw the sword against the French?" asked the prince. "I will arrange as to fight against the Huguenots," replied the unknown, with a smile which his more somber companion might have envied. Chapter 65. French and Flemings. At the moment when the members of the council left the Hôtel de Ville, the officers went to put themselves at the head of their troops and execute the orders they had received. At the same time the artillery sounded. This artillery surprised the French in their nocturnal march, by which they had hoped to surprise the town, but instead of stopping their advance, it only hastened it. If they could not take the city by surprise, they might, as we have seen the King of Navarre do at Cahors, fill up the moats with fascines and burst open the gates with petards. The cannon from the ramparts continued to fire, but in the darkness took scarcely any effect. And after having replied to the cries of their adversaries, the French advanced silently toward the ramparts with that fiery intrepidity which they always show in attack. But all at once, doors and posterns opened, and from all sides poured out armed men, if not with the fierce impetuosity of the French, with a firmness which rendered them massive as a rolling wall. It was the Flemings, who advanced in close ranks and compact masses, above which the cannon continued to thunder, although with more noise than effect. Then the combat began hand to hand, foot to foot, sword to sword, and the flash of pistols lighted up faces red with blood. But not a cry, not a murmur, not a complaint was heard, and the Flemings and French fought with equal rage. The Flemings were furious at having to fight, for fighting was neither their profession nor their pleasure, and the French were furious at being attacked when they meant to have taken the initiative. While the combat was raging furiously, explosions were heard near Saint Marie, and a light rose over the city like a crest of flames. It was Joyce attacking and trying to force the barrier across the Scheldt, and who would soon penetrate into the city, at least, so the French hoped. But it was not so. Joyce had weighed anchor and sailed, and was making rapid progress, favored by the west wind. All was ready for action. The sailors, armed with their boarding cutlasses, were eager for the combat. The gunners stood ready with lighted matches, while some picked men, hatchet in hand, stood ready to jump on the hostile ships and destroy the chains and cords. The 7 ships advanced in silence, disposed in the form of a wedge, of which the admiral's galley formed the point. Joyce himself had taken his first lieutenant's place, and was leaning over the bowsprit, trying to pierce the fogs of the river and the darkness of the night. Soon, through this double obscurity, he saw the pier extending itself darkly across the stream. It appeared deserted. But, in that land of ambushes, there seemed something terrifying in this desertion. However, they continued to advance, and soon were within sight of the barrier, scarcely 10 cable lengths off. They approached nearer and nearer, and yet not a single qui-vive struck on their ears. The sailors only saw in this silence a carelessness which rejoiced them, but their young admiral, more far-seeing, feared some ruse. At last the prow of the admiral's ship touched the two ships which formed the center of the barrier, and made the whole line, which was fastened together by chains, tremble. Suddenly, as the bearers of the hatchets received the order to board and cut the chains, a crowd of grappling irons, thrown by invisible hands, seized hold of the French vessels. The Flemings had forestalled the intended movement of the French. Jogues believed that his enemies were offering him a mortal combat, and he accepted it with alacrity. He also threw grappling irons, and the two lines of ships were firmly bound together. Then, seizing a hatchet, he was the first to jump on a ship, crying, "Board them! Board them!" All his crew followed him, officers and men, uttering the same cry. But no cry replied to them, no force opposed their advance. Only they saw three boats full of men gliding silently over the water, like three seabirds. The assailants rested motionless on the ships which they had conquered without a struggle. All at once Jogues heard under his feet a crackling sound, and a smell of sulphur filled the air. A thought crossed his mind, and he ran and opened a hatchway. The vessel was burning. A cry of, "To our ships," sounded through all the line. Each climbed back again more quickly than he had come in, but Jogues, this time, was the last. Just as he reached his galley, the flames burst out over the whole bridge of boats, like 20 volcanoes, of which each ship or boat was a crater. The order was instantly given to cut the ropes and break the chains and grappling irons, and the sailors worked with the rapidity of men who knew that their safety depended on their exertions. But the work was immense. Perhaps they might have detached those thrown by the enemy on their ships, but they had also to detach those which they themselves had thrown. All at once 20 explosions were heard, and each of the French ships trembled to its center. It was the cannons that defended the port, and which, fully charged and then abandoned by the Antwerpians, exploded as the fire gained on them, breaking everything within their reach. The flames, mounted like gigantic serpents along the masts, rolled themselves round the yards. Then, with their forked tongues, came to lick the sides of the French vessels. Jogues, with his magnificent armor covered with gold, giving calmly, and in an imperious voice, his orders in the midst of the flames, looked like a fabulous salamander covered with scales, and at every movement threw off a shower of sparks. But the explosions became louder than ever. The gun room had taken fire, and the vessels were flying in pieces. Jogues had done his best to free himself, but in vain. The flames had reached the French ships, and showers of fire fell about him. The Flemish barrier was broken, and the French burning ships drifted to the shore. Jogues saw that he could not save his ships, and he gave orders to lower the boats and land on the left bank. This was quickly done, and all the sailors were embarked to a man before Jogues quitted his galley. His sang-froid kept everyone in order, and each man landed with a sword or an axe in his hand. Before he had reached the shore, the fire reached the magazine of his ship, which blew up, lighting the whole horizon. Meanwhile, the artillery from the ramparts had ceased. Not that the combat had abated, but that it was so close it was impossible to fire on enemies without firing on friends also. The Calvinist cavalry had charged and done wonders. Before the swords of its cavaliers a pathway opened, but the wounded Flemings pierced the horses with their large cutlasses, and in spite of this brilliant charge, a little confusion showed itself in the French columns, and they only kept their ground instead of advancing, while from the gates of the city new troops continually poured out. All at once, almost under the walls of the city, a cry of Anjou, France, was heard behind the mass of the Antwerpians. This was Jogues and his 1,500 sailors, armed with hatchets and cutlasses. They had to revenge their fleet in flames, and 200 of their companions burned or drowned. No one could manage his long sword better than Jogues. Every blow cut open a head, every thrust took effect. The group of Flemings on which he fell were destroyed like a field of corn by a legion of locusts. Delighted with their first success, they continued to push on, but the Calvinist cavalry, surrounded by troops, began to lose ground. M. de Saint Aignin's infantry, however, kept their place. The prince had seen the burning of the fleet and heard the reports of the cannon and the explosions, without suspecting anything but a fierce combat which must terminate in victory for Jogues. For how could a few Flemish ships fight against the French fleet? He expected. Then, Every minute a diversion on the part of Joos. When the news was brought to him that the fleet was destroyed and Joos and his men fighting in the midst of the Flemings, he now began to feel very anxious, the fleet being the means of retreat, and consequently the safety of the army. He sent orders to the Calvinist cavalry to try a fresh charge, and men and horses, almost exhausted, rallied to attack the Antwerpians afresh. The voice of Jews was heard in the midst of the melee crying, "Hold firm, M. de Saint-Aignan, France, France," and, like a reaper cutting a field of corn, his sword flew round and cut down its harvest of men. The delicate favorite, the Sybarite, seemed to have put on with his cuirass the strength of a Hercules, and the infantry, hearing his voice above all the noise and seeing his sword flashing, took fresh courage and, like the cavalry, made a new effort and returned to the combat. But now the person that had been called Monsoreau came out of the city on a beautiful black horse. He wore black armor and was followed by 300 well-mounted cavaliers, whom the Prince of Orange had placed at his disposal. By a parallel gate came out William himself, with a picked body of infantry who had not yet appeared. Monsoreau hastened where he was most wanted, that is to say, where Jews was fighting with his sailors. The Flemings recognized him and opened their ranks, crying joyfully, "Monsoreau, Monsoreau." Joes and his men saw the movement, heard the cries, and all at once found themselves opposed to a new troop. Joes pushed his horse toward the Black Knight, and their swords met. Joes was confident in his armor and his science, but all his thrusts were skillfully parried, and one of those of his adversary touched him, and in spite of his armor, drew some drops of blood from his shoulder. "Ah!" cried the young admiral. "This man is a Frenchman, and what is more, he has studied fencing under the same master as I have." At these words the unknown turned away, and tried to find a new antagonist. "If you are French," cried Joes, "you are a traitor, for you fight against your king, your country, and your flag." The unknown only replied by attacking Joes with fresh fury, but now Joes was on his guard, and knew what a skillful swordsman he had to deal. He parried 2 or 3 thrusts with as much skill as fury, and it was now the stranger who made a step back. "See," cried Joes, "what one can do fighting for one's country. A pure heart and a loyal arm suffice to defend a head without a helmet, a face without a visor." And he threw his helmet far from him, displaying his noble and beautiful head, with eyes sparkling with pride, youth, and anger. His antagonist forbore answer, uttered a cry, and struck at his bare head. "Ah!" cried Joes, parrying the blow. "I said you were a traitor, and as a traitor you shall die. I will kill you, and carry off this helmet which hides and defends you, and hang you to the first tree that I see." But at this moment a cavalier cried, "Monsoreau, no more skirmishing. Your presence is wanted over there." Glancing toward the point indicated, the unknown saw the Flemings giving way before the Calvinist cavalry. "Yes," cried he, "those are the men I wanted." At this moment so many cavaliers pressed on the sailors that they made their first step in retreat. The Black Cavalier profited by this movement to disappear in the melee. A quarter of an hour after the French began to give way, M. de Saint-Aignan tried to retreat in good order, but a last troop of 2,000 infantry and 500 horse came out fresh from the city, and fell on this harassed and already retreating army. It was the old band of the Prince of Orange, which had fought in turns against the Duc d'Alva, Don John, Requesens, and Alexandre Farnese. In spite of the coolness of the chiefs and the bravery of many, a frightful rout commenced. At this moment the unknown fell again on the fugitives, and once more met Joes with his now diminished band. The young admiral was mounted on his 3rd horse, 2 having been killed under him. His sword was broken, and he had taken from a sailor one of their heavy hatchets, which he whirled round his head with the greatest apparent ease. From time to time he turned and faced his enemy, like the wild bull who cannot make up his mind to fly, and turns desperately on his hunter. The Flemings, who by Monsoreau's advice had fought without cuirasses, were active in the pursuit and gave no rest to the Angevin army. Something like remorse seized the unknown at the sight of this disaster. "Enough, gentlemen," cried he, in French. "Tonight they are driven from Antwerp, and in a week will be driven from Flanders. Ask no more the God of battles." "Ah!" "He is French," cried Joves. "I guess it, traitor. Ah, be cursed, and may you die the death of a traitor." This furious imprecation seemed to disconcert the unknown more than 1,000 swords raised against him. He turned, and conqueror as he was, fled as rapidly as a conquered. But this retreat of a single man changed nothing in the state of affairs. Fear is contagious. It seized the entire army, and the soldiers began to fly like madmen. The horses went fast, in spite of fatigue, for they also felt the influence of fear. The men dispersed to seek a shelter, and in some hours the army, as an army, existed no longer. This was the time when the dikes were to be opened. From Lyre to Termond, from Hayes Duke to Malines, each little river, swollen by its tributaries, each canal overflowed and spread over the flat country a contingent of furious water. Thus, when the fugitive French began to stop, having tired out the Antwerpians, whom they had seen return to the town, followed by the soldiers of the Prince of Orange, when those who had escaped from the carnage of the night believed themselves saved and stopped to breathe for an instant, some with a prayer and others with a curse, then a new enemy, blind and pitiless, was preparing for them. Joves had commanded his sailors, now reduced to 800, to make a halt. They were the only persons who had preserved some order, the Comte de Saint-Aignan having vainly tried to rally his foot soldiers. The Duc d'Anjou, at the head of the fugitives, mounted on an excellent horse, and accompanied by a single servant, pushed forward without appearing to think of anything. "He has no heart," cried some. "His sang-froid is magnificent," said others. Some hours of repose, from 2 to 6 in the morning, restored to the infantry the strength to continue their retreat. But provisions were wanting. As for the horses, they seemed more fatigued than the men, and could scarcely move, for they had eaten nothing since the day before. The fugitives hoped to gain Brussels, where the Duke had many partisans, although they were not free from anxiety as to their reception. At Brussels, which was about 8 leagues off, they would find food for the famishing troops and a place of security from whence to recommence the campaign at a more favorable time. M. d'Anjou breakfasted in a peasant's hut between Hoboken and Heckhout. It was empty, but a fire still burned in the grate. The soldiers and officers wished to imitate their chief and spread themselves about the village, but found with a surprise mingled with terror that every house was deserted and empty. M. de Saint-Aignan, who had aided them in their search, now called to the officers, "March on, gentlemen. But we are tired and dying with hunger, Colonel." "Yes, but you are alive, and if you remain here another hour you will be dead. Perhaps it is already too late." M. de Saint-Aignan knew nothing, but he suspected some great danger. They went on, but 2,000 or 3,000 men straggled from the main body, or, worn out with fatigue, lay down on the grass, or at the foot of a tree, wearied, desolate, and despairing. Scarcely 3,000 able men remained to the Duc d'Anjou. Chapter 66. The travelers, while these disasters, the forerunners of a still greater one, were taking place. 2 travelers, mounted on excellent horses, left Brussels on a fine night and rode toward Mechlin. They rode side by side, without any apparent arms but a large Flemish knife, of which the handle appeared in the belt of one of them. They rode on, each occupied with thoughts perhaps the same, without speaking a word. They looked like those commercial travelers who at that time carried on an extensive trade between France and Flanders. Whoever had met them trotting so peaceably along the road would have taken them for honest men, anxious to find a bed after their day's work. However, it was only necessary to overhear a few sentences of their conversation to lose any such opinion suggested by their appearance. They were about half a league from Brussels when the tallest of them said, "Madam, you were quite right to set off tonight. We shall gain 7 leagues by it, and shall probably arrive at Mechlin by the time the result of the attack on Antwerp is known. In 2 days of short marches, and you must take easy stages, we shall reach Antwerp." The person who was called Madam, in spite of a male costume, replied in a voice calm, grave, and sweet, "My friend, believe me, God will tire protecting this wicked prince, and will strike him cruelly. Let us hasten to put our project into execution, for I am not one of those who believe in fatality, and I think that men have perfect freedom in will and deed. If we leave his punishment to God and do not act ourselves, it was not worthwhile living so unhappily until now. At this moment a blast of north wind, cold and biting, swept across the plain. "You shiver, madam," said the other traveler. "Take your cloak." "No, thank you, Remy. I no longer feel pain of body or mind." Remy rode on silently, only now and then stopping and looking back. "You see no one behind us?" asked she after one of these halts. "No one, madam. That cavalier whom we met at Valenciennes, and who inquired about us after looking at us so curiously. He is not here, madam, but I fancied I saw him again near Mons. And I, madam, am sure I saw him just before we entered Brussels." "Brussels?" "Yes, but he must have stopped there." "Remy," said Diana, drawing near him, as if even on that lonely road you feared to be overheard, "did he not seem to you like, in figure, at least, for I did not see his face, that unhappy young man?" "Oh, no, madam, not at all. And besides, how could he have guessed that we had left Paris, and were traveling along this road? But he found us out when we changed our house in Paris." "No, madam, I am sure he did not follow us, and, indeed, I believe he had resolved on a desperate course as regards himself. Alas, Remy, every one has his own share of suffering. I trust God will console this poor youth." Remy replied with a sigh, and they went on with no other sound than that of their horses' feet on the hard road. 2 hours passed thus. Just as they were about to enter Vilvoorde, Remy turned his head, for he heard the sound of horses' feet behind them. He stopped and listened, but could see nothing. His eyes uselessly tried to pierce through the darkness of the night, and as he no longer heard any sounds, they rode on and entered the town. "Madam," said he, "if you will take my advice, you will stay here. Daylight will soon appear, the horses are tired, and you yourself need repose." "Remy, you are anxious about something." "Yes, about your health. Madam, believe me, a woman cannot support so much fatigue. I can scarcely do so myself." "As you please. Remy." "Well, then, enter that narrow street. I see a light at the end of it, which must proceed from an inn. Be quick, I beg you. You have heard something." "I thought I heard a horse's feet. I am not sure, but I will stay behind a minute to find out." The lady, without replying, went on, and Remy got off his horse and let him follow her, while he hid himself behind an immense post and waited. The lady knocked at the door of the inn, behind which, according to the hospitable custom of the country, watched, or rather slept, a maid-servant. The girl woke up and received the traveler with perfect good humor, and then opened the stable door for the 2 horses. "I am waiting for my companion," said Diana. "Let me sit by the fire. I shall not go to bed until he comes." The servant threw some straw to the horses, shut the stable door, then returned to the kitchen, put a chair by the fire, snuffed a candle with her fingers, and went to sleep again. Meanwhile, Remy was watching for the arrival of the traveler whose horse he had heard. He saw him enter the town and go on slowly, and seeming to listen. Then, seeing the inn, he appeared to hesitate whether to go there or to continue his journey. He stopped close to Remy, who laid his hand on his knife. "It is he again," thought Remy, "and he is following us. What can he want?" After a minute the traveler murmured in a low voice, "They must have gone on, and so will I," and he rode forward. "Tomorrow we will change our route," thought Remy, and he rejoined Diana, who was waiting impatiently for him. "Well," said she softly, "are we followed?" "There is no one. I was wrong. You may sleep in perfect safety. Madam." "I am not sleepy, Remy." "At least have supper. Madam, you have scarcely eaten anything." "Willingly, Remy." They reawakened the poor servant, who got up as good-humoredly as before, and hearing what they wanted, took from the cupboard a piece of salt pork, a cold leveret, and some sweets, which he set before them, together with a frothing jug of Louvain beer. Remy sat down with Diana, who drank half a glass of beer, and ate a piece of bread. Remy did the same, and then they both rose. "Are you not going to eat any more?" asked the girl. "No, thank you, we have done." "Will you not eat any meat? It is very nice." "I am sure it is excellent, but we are not hungry." The girl clasped her hands in astonishment at this strange abstinence. It was not that she was used to see travelers eat. Remy threw a piece of money on the table. "Oh," said the girl, "I cannot change all that. 6 farthings would be all your bill." "Keep it all, my girl," said Diana. "It is true my brother and I eat little, but we pay the same as others." The servant became red with joy. "Tell me, my girl," said Remy, "is there any crossroad from here to Mechlin?" "Yes, monsieur, but it is very bad, while the regular road is a very fine one." "Yes, my child, I know that, but we wish to travel by the other." "Oh, I told you, monsieur, because, as your companion is a lady, the road would not do for her." "Why not?" "Because tonight a great number of people will cross the country to go to Brussels." "To Brussels?" "Yes, it is a temporary emigration." "For what reason?" "I do not know. They had orders." "From whom? The Prince of Orange?" "No, from Monseigneur." "Who is he?" "I do not know, monsieur." "And who are the emigrants?" "The inhabitants of the country and of the villages which have no dikes or ramparts." "It is strange." "We ourselves," said the girl, "are to set out at daybreak, as well as all the other people in the town. Yesterday, at 11 o'clock, all the cattle were sent to Brussels by canals and crossroads. Therefore, on the road of which you speak, there must be great numbers of horses, carts, and people. I should have thought the great road better for all that." "I do not know. It was the order. But we can go on to Mechlin, I suppose." "I should think so, unless you will do like everyone else, and go to Brussels." "No, no, we will go on at once to Mechlin," said Diana, rising. "Open the stable, if you please, my good girl." "Danger every way," thought Remy. "However, the young man is before us." And as the horses had not been unsaddled, they mounted again, and the rising sun found them on the banks of the Dial. Chapter 67. Explanation. The danger that Remy braved was a real one. For the traveller, after having passed the village and gone on for a quarter of a league, and seeing no one before him, made up his mind that those whom he sought had remained behind in the village. He would not retrace his steps, but lay down in a field of clover. Having made his horse descend into one of those deep ditches which in Flanders serve as divisions between the properties, he was therefore able to see without being seen. This young man, as Remy knew, and Diana suspected, was Henri du Bouchage, whom a strange fatality threw once more into the presence of the woman he had determined to fly. After his conversation with Remy, on the threshold of the mysterious house, that is to say, after the loss of all his hopes, he had returned to the Hotel Juice, quite decided to put an end to a life which he felt to be so miserable, and as a gentleman, and one who had his name to keep untarnished, he decided on the glorious suicide of the field of battle. Therefore, as they were fighting in Flanders, and his brother had commandé, Henri, on the following day, left his hotel 20 hours after the departure of Diana and Remy. Letters from Flanders announced the intended coup de main on Antwerp, and Henri hoped to arrive in time for it. He pleased himself with the idea that he should die sword in hand, in his brother's arms, under a French flag, and that his death would be talked about until the sound even reached the solitude in which the mysterious lady lived. Noble follies, glorious yet sad dreams. Just as, full of these thoughts, he came in sight of Valenciennes, from whose church tower 8 o'clock was sounding, he perceived that they were about to close the gates. He pushed on, and nearly overturned, on the drawbridge, a man who was fastening the girths of his horse. Henri stopped to make excuses to the man, who turned at the sound of his voice, and then quickly turned away again. Henri started, but immediately thought, "I must be mad. Remy here, whom I left 4 days ago in the Rue de Bussy, here now, without his mistress. Really, grief must be turning my brain and making me see everything in the form of my own fancies." And he continued his way, convinced that his idea had been pure fancy. At the first hotel that he came to, he stopped, gave his horse to a servant, and sat down on a bench before the door while they prepared his bed and supper. But as he sat there, he saw two travelers approaching, and this time he saw more clearly. "Now," murmured he, "I do not dream, and still I think I see Remy. I cannot remain in this uncertainty. I must clear up my doubts." He got up and ran down the road after them, but they had disappeared. Then he went to all the hotels and questioned the servants, and after much search discovered that two cavaliers had been seen going toward a small inn in the Rue de Beffroi. The landlord was just shutting the doors when Henri entered. While the man offered him rooms and refreshment, he looked round and saw on the top of the staircase Remy going up, lighted by a servant. Of his companion he saw nothing. Dubauchage had no longer any doubts, and he asked himself, with a dreadful sinking of the heart, my Remy had left his mistress and was traveling without her. For Henri had been so occupied in identifying Remy that he had scarcely looked at his companion. The next morning when he rose, he was much surprised to learn that the two travelers had obtained from the governor permission to go out, and that, contrary to all custom, the gates had been opened for them. Thus, as they had set out at 1 o'clock, they had 6 hours' start of him. Henri put his horse to the gallop and passed the travelers at Mons. He saw Remy, but Remy must have been a sorcerer to know him, for he had on a soldier's greatcoat and rode another horse. Nevertheless, Remy's companion, at a word from him, turned away his head before Henri could see his face. But the young man did not lose courage. He watched them to their hotel, and then questioning, with the aid of an irresistible auxiliary, learned that Remy's companion was a very handsome, but very silent and sad-looking young man. Henri trembled. "Can it be a woman?" asked he. "It is possible," replied the host. "Many women travel thus disguised just now, to go and rejoin their lovers in Flanders, but it is our business to see nothing, and we never do." Henri felt heartbroken at this explanation. Was Remy, indeed, accompanying his mistress dressed as a cavalier, and was she, as the host suggested, going to rejoin her lover in Flanders? Had Remy lied when he spoke of an eternal regret? Was this fable of a past love, which had clothed his mistress forever in mourning, only his invention to get rid of an importunate watcher? "If it be so," cried Henri, "the time will come when I shall have courage to address this woman and reproach her with all the subterfuges which lower whom I have placed so high above all ordinary mortals. And seeing nearer this brilliant envelope of a common mind, perhaps I shall fall of myself from the height of my illusions and my love." And the young man tore his hair in despair at the thought of losing the love which was killing him, for a dead heart is better than an empty one. So he continued to follow them, and to wonder at the cause which took to Flanders, at the same time as himself, these two beings so indispensable to his existence. At Brussels he gathered information as to the Duc d'Anjou's intended campaign. The Flemings were too hostile to the Duke to receive well a Frenchman of distinction, and were too proud of their position to refrain from humiliating a little this gentleman who came from France and questioned them in a pure Parisian accent, which always seemed ridiculous to the Belgians. Henri began to conceive serious fears with reference to this expedition, in which his brother was to bear so prominent a part, and he resolved in consequence to push on rapidly to Antwerp. It was a constant surprise to him to see Remy and his companion, in spite of their desire not to be seen, continue to follow the same road as himself. Henri, now hidden in the clover field, felt certain of seeing the face of the young man who accompanied Remy, and thus putting an end to all his doubts. As they passed, unsuspicious of his vicinity, Diana was occupied in braiding up her hair, which she had not dared to untie at the inn. Henri recognized her and nearly fainted. The travelers passed on, and then anger took, in Henri's mind, the place of the goodness and patience he had exercised, while he believed Remy and the lady sincere toward him. But after the protestations of Remy, this journey seemed to him a species of treason. When he had recovered a little from the blow, he rose, shook back his beautiful light hair, and mounted his horse, determined no longer to take those precautions that respect had made him hitherto observe, and he began to follow the travelers openly, and with his face uncovered. No more cloak nor hood, no more stops and hesitation. The road belonged to him as to them, and he rode on, regulating the pace of his horse by that of theirs. He did not mean to speak to them, but only to let them see him. Remy soon perceived him, and, seeing him thus openly advance without any further attempt at concealment, grew troubled. Diana noticed it and turned also. "Is it not that young man following us?" Remy, still trying to reassure her, said, "I do not think so, madam. As well as I can judge by the dress, it is some young Walloon soldier going probably to Amsterdam, and passing by the theatre of war to seek adventures. I feel uneasy about him. Remy, reassure yourself, madam. Had he been really the Comte de Bouchage, he would have spoken to us. You know how persevering he was. I know also that he was respectful, Remy, or I should never have troubled myself about him, but simply told you to get rid of him. Well, madam, if he be so respectful, you would have no more to fear from him on this road than in the Rue de Bussy. Nevertheless, Remy, let us change our horses here at Mechlin, in order to get on faster to Antwerp. On the contrary, madam, I should say, do not let us enter Mechlin at all. Our horses are good. Let us push on to that little village which is, I think, called Vilbrock. In that manner we shall avoid the town, with its questioners and curious gazers. Go on, then, Remy." They turned to the left, taking a road hardly made, but which visibly led to Vilbrock. Henri also quitted the road, and turned down the lane, still keeping his distance from them. Remy's disquietude showed itself in his constantly turning to look behind him. At last they arrived at Vilbrock. Of 200 houses which this village contained, not one was inhabited. Some forgotten dogs and lost cats ran wildly about the solitude, the former calling for their masters by long howls. Remy knocked at 20 doors, but found no one. Henri on his side, who seemed the shadow of the travelers, knocked at the first house as uselessly as they had done. Then, divining that the war was the cause of his desertion, waited to continue his journey until the travelers should have decided what to do. They fed their horses with some corn which they found in an inn, and then Remy said, "Madam, we are no longer in a friendly country, nor in an ordinary situation. We must not expose ourselves uselessly. We shall certainly fall in with some French, Spanish, or Flemish band, for in the present state of Flanders, adventures of all kinds must be rife. If you were a man, I should speak differently, but you are a young and beautiful woman, and would run a double risk for life and honor." "My life is nothing," said she. "On the contrary, madam, it is everything. You live for a purpose. Well, then, what do you propose? Think and act for me, Remy." "Then, madam, let us remain here. I see many houses which would afford us a sure shelter. I have arms, and we will defend or hide ourselves as we shall be strong or weak." "No, Remy, no, I must go on. Nothing must stop me, and if I had fears, they would be for you." "We will go on then." They rode on, therefore, without another word, and Henri du Bouchage followed. Chapter 68. The water. As the travelers advanced, the country took an equally strange aspect, for it was utterly deserted, as well as the towns and villages. Nowhere were the calves to be seen grazing in the meadows, nor the goat perched on the top of the mountain, or nibbling the green shoots of the briar or young vine. Nowhere the shepherd with his flock, nowhere the cart with its driver, no foreign merchant passing from one country to another with his pack on his back, no ploughman singing his harsh song or cracking his long whip. As far as the eye could see over the magnificent plains, the little hills and the woods, not a human figure was to be seen, not a voice to be heard. It seemed like the earth before the creation of animals or men. The only people who animated this dreary solitude were Remy and his companion, and Henri following behind and preserving ever the same distance. The night came on dark and cold, and the northeast wind whistled in the air, and filled the solitude with its menacing sound. Remy stopped his companion, and putting his hand on the bridle of her horse, said, "Madam, you know how inaccessible I am to fear. You know I would not turn my back to save my life. But this evening some strange feeling possesses me, and forbids me to go further. Madam, call it terror, timidity, panic, what you will. I confess that for the first time in my life I am afraid." The lady turned. "Is he still there?" she said. "Oh, I was not thinking of him. Think no more of him. Madam, I beg of you, we need not fear a single man. No, the danger that I rather feel, or divine with a sort of instinct, is unknown to me, and therefore I dread it. Look, madam, do you see those willows bending in the wind? Yes. By their side I see a little house. I beg you, let us go there. If it is inhabited, we will ask for hospitality, and if not, we will take possession of it. I beg you to consent, madam. Remy's emotion and troubled voice decided Diana to yield, so she turned her horse in the direction indicated by him. Some minutes after, they knocked at the door. A stream, which ran into the Neve, a little river about a mile off, bordered with reeds and grassy banks, bathed the feet of the willows with its murmuring waters. Behind the house, which was built of bricks and covered with tiles, was a little garden encircled by a quickset hedge. All was empty, solitary, and deserted, and no one replied to the blows struck by the travelers. Remy did not hesitate. He drew his knife, cut a branch of willow, with which he pushed back the bolt and opened the door. The lock, the clumsy work of a neighboring blacksmith, yielded almost without resistance. Remy entered quickly, followed by Diana. Then, closing the door again, he drew a massive bolt, and thus entrenched, seemed to breathe more freely. Feeling about, he found a bed, a chair, and a table in an upper room. He installed his mistress, and then, returning to the lower room, placed himself at the window to watch the movements of debauchage. His reflections were as somber as those of Remy. Certainly, said he to himself, some danger unknown to us, but of which the inhabitants are not ignorant, is about to fall on the country, will ravages the land. Perhaps the French have taken, or are about to assault Antwerp, and the peasants, seized with terror, have gone to take refuge in the towns. But this reasoning, however plausible, did not quite satisfy him. Then he thought, but what are Remy and his mistress doing here? What imperious necessity drags them toward this danger? Oh, I will know. The time has come to speak to this woman and to clear away all my doubts. Never shall I find a better opportunity. He approached the house, and then suddenly stopped, with a hesitation common to hearts in love. No, said he, no, I will be a martyr to the end. Besides, is she not mistress of her own actions? And, perhaps, she does not even know what fable was invented by Remy. Oh, it is he alone that I hate. He who assured me that she loved no one. But still let me be just. Ought this man for me, whom he did not know, to have betrayed his mistress's secrets? No, no. All that remains for me now is to follow this woman to the camp, to see her hang her arms round some one's neck and hear her say, see what I have suffered and how I love you. Well, I will follow her there, see what I dread to see, and die of it. It will be trouble save for the musket or cannon. Alas, I did not seek this. I went calmly to me a glorious death, and I wish to die with a name on my lips. It is not so to be. I am destined to a death full of bitterness and torture. Well, I accept it. Then, recalling his days of waiting and his nights of anguish before the inexorable house, he found that he was less to be pitied here than at Paris, and he went on. I will stay here and take these trees for shelter, and then I can hear her voice when she speaks and see a shadow on the window. He lay down, then, under the willows, listening, with a melancholy impossible to describe, to the murmur of the water that flowed at his side. All at once he started. The noise of cannon was brought distinctly to him by the wind. Ah, said he, I shall arrive too late. They are attacking Antwerp. His first idea was to rise, mount his horse, and ride on as quickly as possible. But to do this he must quit the lady and die in doubt. So he remained. During 2 hours he lay there, listening to the reports. He did not guess that what he heard was his brother's ships blowing up. At last, about 2 o'clock, all grew quiet. Now, thought Henri, Antwerp is taken, and my brother is a conqueror. But after Antwerp will come Ghent, and then Bruges. I shall not want an occasion for a glorious death. But before I die, I must know what this woman wants in the French camp. He lay still, and had just fallen asleep, when his horse, which was grazing quietly near him, pricked up his ears and neighed loudly. Henri opened his eyes. The animal had his head turned to the breeze, which had changed to the southeast, as if listening. "What is it, my good horse?" said the young man. "Have you seen some animal which frightened you, or do you regret the shelter of your stable?" The animal stood still, looking toward Lyra, with his eyes fixed and his nostrils distended, and listening. "Aye," said Henri, "it is more serious. Perhaps some troops of wolves following the army to devour the corpses." The horse neighed and began to run forward to the west, but his master caught the bridle and jumped on his back, and then was able to keep him quiet. But after a minute, Henri himself began to hear what the horse had heard, a long murmur, like the wind, but more solemn, which seemed to come from different points of the compass, from south to north. "What is it?" said Henri. "Can it be the wind?" "No, it is the wind which brings this sound, and I hear the two distinctly. An army in march, perhaps, but no, I should hear the sound of voices and of regular marching. Is it the crackling of a fire? No, there is no light in the horizon. The heaven seems even to grow darker." The noise redoubled and became distinct. It was an incessant growling and rolling, as if thousands of cannon were being dragged over a paved road. Henri thought of this. "But no," said he, "there is no paved road near." The noise continued to increase, and Henri put his horse to the gallop and gained an eminence. "What do I see?" cried he, as he attained the summit. What he saw his horse had seen before him, for he had only been able to make him advance by furious spurring, and when they arrived at the top of the hill he reared so as nearly to fall backward. They saw in the horizon an infinite body rolling over the plain, and visibly and rapidly approaching. The young man looked in wonder at this strange phenomenon, when, looking back to the place he had come from, he saw the plain beginning to be covered with water, and that the little river had overflowed, and was beginning to cover the reeds which a quarter of an hour before had stood up stiffly on its banks. "Fool that I am," cried he, "I never thought of it. The water, the water, the Flemings have broken their dikes." Henri flew to the house, and knocked furiously at the door. "Open, open," cried he. No one replied. "Open, Remy," cried he, furious with terror. "It is I, Henri du Bouchage." "Oh, you need not name yourself, M. le Comte," answered Remy from within. "I recognized you long ago, but I warn you that if you break in the door you will find me behind it, with a pistol in each hand." "But you do not understand," cried Henri. "The water, it is the water." "No fables, no pretext or dishonorable ruses, M. le Comte. I tell you that you will only enter over my body. Then I will pass over it, but I will enter. In heaven's name, in the name of your own safety and your mistress's, will you open?" "No." Henri looked round him, and perceived an immense stone. He raised it and threw it against the door, which flew open. A ball passed over Henri's head, but without touching him, he jumped toward Remy, and seizing his other arm, cried, "Do you not see that I have no arms? Do not defend yourself against a man who does not attack. Look, only look." And he drew him to the window. "Well," said he, "do you see now?" And he pointed to the horizon. "The water," cried Remy. "Yes, the water. It invades us. See, at our feet, the river overflows, and in 5 minutes we shall be surrounded." "Madam, madam," cried Remy. "Do not frighten her. Remy, get ready the horses at once." Remy ran to the stable, and Henri flew up the staircase. At Remy's cry, Diana had opened the door. Henri seized her in his arms and carried her away as he would have done a child. But she, believing in treason or violence, struggled and clung to the staircase with all her might. "Tell her that I am saving her, Remy," cried Henri. Remy heard the appeal and cried, "Yes, yes, madam, he is saving you, or rather he will save you. Come, for heaven's sake." Chapter 69. Flight. Henri, without losing time in reasoning with Diana, carried her out of the house, and wished to place her before him on his horse. But she, with a movement of invincible repugnance, glided from his arms, and was received by Remy, who placed her on her own horse. "Aye, madam," cried Henri. How little you understand my heart. It was not, believe me, for the pleasure of holding you in my arms or pressing you to my heart, although for that favor I would sacrifice my life, but that we ought to fly as quickly as the birds, and look at them, how they fly. Indeed, in the scarcely dawning light were seen large numbers of curlews and pigeons, traversing the air with a quick and frightened flight, which, in the night, usually abandoned to the silent bat, looked strange to the eye, and sounded sinister to the ear. Diana did not reply, but rode on without turning her head. Her horse, however, as well as that of Remy, was fatigued with their long journey, and Henri, as he turned back each moment, so they could not keep up with him. "See, madam," said he, "how my horse outstrips yours, and yet I am holding him with all my strength. For heaven's sake, madam, while there is yet time, if you will not ride with me, take my horse and leave me yours." "No, thank you, monsieur," replied she in her usual calm voice. "But, madam," cried Henri in despair, "the water gains on us. Do you hear? Do you hear?" Indeed, a horrible crashing was now heard. It was the dike of a neighboring village giving way to swell the inundation. Boards and props had given way. A double row of stakes broke with a noise like thunder, and the water, rushing over the ruins, began to invade an oak wood, of which they saw the tops trembling, and heard the branches cracking as though a flight of demons were passing under the leaves. The uprooted trees knocking against the stakes, the wood of ruined houses floating on the waters, the distant neighings and cries of horses and men carried away by the inundation, formed a concert of sounds so strange and gloomy that the terror which agitated Henri began to seize also upon Diana. She spurred her horse, and he, as if he understood the danger, redoubled his efforts. But the water gained on them, and before 10 minutes it was evident that it would reach them. Every instant Henri turned and cried, "Quicker, madam, for pity's sake, the water comes. Here it is." It came, indeed, foaming and turbulent, carrying away like a feather the house in which they had taken shelter, and majestic, immense, rolling like a serpent, it arrived like a wall behind the horses of Remy and Diana. Henri uttered a cry of terror, and turned on the water, as though he would have fought it. "You see you are lost," screamed he. "Come, madam, perhaps there is still time. Come with me." "No, monsieur," said she. "In a minute it will be too late. Look," cried he. Diana turned. The water was within 50 feet of her. "Let my fate be accomplished," said she. "You, monsieur, fly." Remy's horse, exhausted, fell and could not rise again, despite the efforts of his rider. "Save her in spite of herself," cried Remy. And at the same moment, as he disengaged himself from the stirrups, the water passed over the head of the faithful servant. His mistress, at this sight, uttered a terrible cry, and tried to jump off her horse to perish with him. But Henri, seeing her intention, seized her round the waist, and placing her before him, set off like an arrow. "Remy, Remy," cried she, extending her arms. A cry was the only answer. Remy had come up to the surface, and, with the indomitable hope which accompanies a dying man to the last, was swimming, sustained by a beam. By his side came his horse, beating the water desperately with his feet, while the water gained on Diana's horse, and some 20 feet in front Henri and Diana flew on the third horse, which was half mad with terror. Remy scarcely regretted life, since he hoped that his loved mistress would be saved. "Adieu, madam," cried he. "I go first to him who waits for us, to tell him that you live for." He could not finish. A mountain of water rolled over his head. "Remy, Remy," cried the lady, "I wish to die with you." "I will, monsieur, I will go to him. In the name of God, I will." She pronounced these words with so much energy and angry authority that the young man unfolded his arms and let her slip to the ground, saying, "Well, madam, we will all three die here together. It is a joy I had not hoped for." As he said these words, he stopped his horse, and the water reached them almost immediately. But, by a last effort of love, the young man kept hold of Diana's arm as she stood on the ground. The flood rolled over them. It was a sublime spectacle to see the sang-froid of the young man, whose entire bust was raised above the water, while he sustained Diana with one arm, and with the other guided the last efforts of his expiring horse. There was a moment of terrible struggle, during which the lady, upheld by Henri, kept her head above water, while with his left hand he kept off the floating wood and the corpses which would have struck against them. One of the bodies floating past sighed out, "Adieu, madame." "Heavens!" cried Henri, "it is Remy." And without calculating the danger of the additional weight, he seized him by his sleeve, drew him up, and enabled him to breathe freely. But the exhausted horse now sank in the water to its neck, then to its eyes, and finally disappeared altogether. "We must die," murmured Henri. "Madame, my life and soul belong to you." As he spoke, he felt Remy slip from him, and he no longer tried to retain him. It was useless. His only care was to sustain Diana above the water, that she at least might die the last, and that he might be able to say to himself, in his last moments, that he had done his utmost to save her. All at once, a joyful cry sounded at his side. He turned and saw Remy, who had found a boat which had belonged to the little house where they had taken shelter, and which the water had carried away. Remy, who had regained his strength, thanks to Henri's assistance, had seized it as it floated past. The oars were tied to it, and an iron hook lay in the bottom. He held out the hook to Henri, who seized it, and drawing Diana with him, raised her over his shoulders, and passed her to Remy, and then climbed in himself. The first rays of the rising sun showed them the plains inundated, and the boat swimming like an atom on the ocean covered with wrecks. Toward the left rose a little hill, completely surrounded by water, looking like an island in the midst of the sea. Henri took the oars and rowed toward it, while Remy, with the boat hook, occupied himself in keeping off the beams and wrecks which might have struck against them. Thanks to Henri's strength and Remy's skill, they reached, or rather, were thrown against, the hill. Remy jumped out and, seizing the chain, drew the boat toward him. Diana, rising alone, followed him, and then Henri, who drew up the boat and seated himself a little way from them. They were saved from the most menacing danger, for the inundation, however strong, could never reach to the summit of the hill. Below them they could see that great angry waste of waters, which seemed inferior in power only to God himself, and, by the increasing light, they perceived that it was covered with the corpses of French soldiers. Remy had a wound in his shoulder, where a floating beam had struck against him, but Diana, thanks to Henri's protection, was free from all injury, although she was cold and wet. At last they noticed in the horizon, on the eastern side, something like fires burning on a height which the water could not reach. As well as they could judge, they were about a league off. Remy advanced to the point of the hill, and said that he believed he saw a jetty advancing in a direct line toward the fires. But they could see nothing clearly, and knew not well where they were, for though day was dawning, it came cloudily and full of fog. Had it been clear and under a pure sky, they might have seen the town of Mechlin, from which they were not more than 2 leagues distant. "Well, M. le Comte," said Remy, "what do you think of those fires?" "Those fires, which seem to you to announce a hospitable shelter, appear to me to be full of danger." "And why so?" "Remy," said Henri, lowering his voice, "look at these corpses. They are all French. There is not one Fleming. They announce to us a great disaster. The dikes are being broken to finish the destruction of the French army, if it has been conquered, to nullify the victory, if they have been victors. Those fires are as likely to have been lighted by enemies as by friends, and may be simply a ruse to draw fugitives to destruction. Nevertheless, we cannot stay here. My mistress will die of cold and hunger." "You are right, Remy. Remain here with Madame, and I will go to the jetty and return to you with news." "No, monsieur," said Diana. "You shall not expose yourself alone. We have been saved together. We will live or die together. Remy, your arm. I am ready." Each word which he pronounced had so irresistible an accent of authority that no one thought of disputing it. Henri bowed and walked first. It was more calm. The jetty formed, with the hill, a kind of bay where the water slept. All 3 got into the little boat, which was once more launched among the wrecks and floating bodies. A quarter of an hour after, they touched the jetty. They tied the chain of the boat to a tree, landed once more, walked along the jetty for nearly an hour, and then arrived at a number of Flemish huts, among which, in a place planted with lime trees, were 200 or 300 soldiers sitting round a fire, above whom floated the French flag. Suddenly a sentinel, placed about 100 feet from a bivouac, cried, "Qui vive?" "France," replied Dubauchich. Then, turning to Diana, he said, "Now, Madam, you are saved. I recognize the standard of the young dames of Aunis, a corps in which I have many friends." At the cry of the sentinel and the answer of the comte, several young dames ran to meet the newcomers, doubly welcome, in the midst of this terrible disaster, as survivors and compatriots. Henri was soon recognized. He was eagerly questioned and recounted the miraculous manner in which he and his companions had escaped death. Remy and Diana had sat down silently in a corner, but Henri fetched them and made them come to the fire, for both were still dripping with water. "Madam," said he, "you will be respected here as in your own house. I have taken the liberty of calling you one of my relations." And without waiting for the thanks of those whose lives he had saved, he went away to rejoin the officers. The young dames of Aunis, of whom our fugitives were claiming hospitality, had retired in good order after the defeat and the sauve-qui-peut of the chiefs. Wherever there is similarity of position and sentiment, and the habit of living together, it is common to find unanimity in execution as well as in thought. It had been so that night with the young dames of Aunis. For seeing their chief abandon them, they agreed together to draw their ranks closer, instead of breaking them. They therefore put their horses to the gallop, and, under the conduct of one of the ensigns, whom they loved for his bravery and respected for his birth, they took the road to Brussels. Like all the actors in this terrible scene, they saw the progress of the inundation, and were pursued by the furious waters, but by good luck found in this spot a position strong both against men and water. The inhabitants, knowing themselves in safety, had not quitted their homes, and had only sent off their women, children, and old men to Brussels. Therefore the young dames met with resistance when they arrived, but death howled behind them, and they attacked like desperate men, triumphed over all obstacles, lost 10 men, but established the others, and turned out the Flemings. Such was the recital which Henri received from them. "And the rest of the army?" asked he. "Look," replied the ensign, "the corpses which pass each moment answer your question." "But, my brother," said Henri, in a choking voice. "Alas, le comte, we do not know. He fought like a lion, but he survived the battle. As to the inundation, I cannot say." Henri shook his head sadly. Then, after a minute's pause, said, "And the Duke?" "Comte, the Duke fled one of the first. He was mounted on a white horse, with no spot but a black star on the forehead. Well, just now we saw the horse pass among a mass of wrecks. The foot of a rider was caught in the stirrup and was floating on the water." "Great God!" "Good heavens!" echoed Remy, who had drawn near and heard the tale. "One of my men ventured down into the water and seized the reins of the floating horse, and drew it up sufficiently to enable us to see the white boot and gold spur that the Duke wore. But the waters were rushing past, and the man was forced to let go to save himself, and we saw no more. We shall not even have the consolation of giving a Christian burial to our prince. Dead. He also? The heir to the crown. What a misfortune." Remy turned to his mistress, and with an expression impossible to describe, said, "He is dead, madam, you see." "I praise the Lord, who has spared us a crime," said she, raising her eyes to heaven. "Yes, but it prevents our vengeance. Vengeance only belongs to a man when God forgets. But you, yourself, comte," said the ensign to Henri, "what are you about to do?" The comte started. "I," said he. "Yes. I will wait here till my brother's body passes," replied he, gloomily. "Then I will try to draw him to land. You may be sure that if once I hold him, I shall not let go." Remy looked pityingly at the young man, but Diana heard nothing. She was praying. Chapter 70. Transfiguration. After a prayer, Diana rose so beautiful and radiant that the Comte uttered a cry of surprise and admiration. She appeared to be waking out of a long sleep, of which the dreams had fatigued her and weighed upon her mind. Or rather, she was like the daughter of Jairus, cold from death and rising from a funeral couch, already purified and ready for heaven, awakening from a lethargy. She cast around her a glance so sweet and gentle that Henri began to believe he should see a feel for his pain, and yield to a sentiment of gratitude and pity. While the young dames, after their frugal repast, slept about among the ruins, Remy himself yielded to it. Henri came and sat down close to Diana, and in a voice so low and sweet that it seemed a murmur of the breeze, said, "Madam, you live. Oh, let me tell you all the joy which overflows my heart when I see you here in safety, after having seen you on the threshold of the tomb." "It is true, monsieur," replied she. "I live through you, and I wish I could say I was grateful." "But, madam," replied Henri, with an immense effort, "if it is only that you are restored to those you love." "What do you mean?" "To those you are going to rejoin through so many perils." "Monsieur, those I love are dead. Those I am going to rejoin are so also." "Oh, madam," cried Henri, falling on his knees, "throw your eyes on me, who have suffered so much and loved so much. Oh, do not turn away. You are young and beautiful as the angels in heaven. Read my heart, which I open to you, and you will see that it contains not an atom of that love that most men feel. You do not believe me? Examine the past hours. Which of them has given me joy or even hope? Yet I have persevered. You made me weep. I devoured my tears. You made me suffer. I hid my sufferings. You drove me to seek death, and I went to meet it without a complaint. Even at this moment, when you turn away your head, when each of my words, burning as they are, seems a drop of ice water falling on your heart, my soul is full of you, and I live only because you live. Just now, was I not ready to die with you? What have I asked for? Nothing. Have I touched your hand? Never, but to draw you from a mortal peril. I held you in my arms to draw you from the waves. Nothing more. All in me has been purified by the devouring fire of my love. Oh, monsieur, for pity's sake, do not speak thus to me. Oh, in pity do not condemn me. He told me you loved no one. Oh, repeat to me this assurance. It is a singular favor for a man in love to ask to be told that he is not loved, but I prefer to know that you are insensible to all. Oh, madam, you are the only adoration of my life. Reply to me. In spite of Henri's prayers, a sigh was the only answer. You say nothing, continued the Comte. Remy at least had more pity for me, for he tried to console him. Oh, I see you will not reply, because you do not wish to tell me that you came to Flanders to rejoin someone happier than I, and yet I am young, and am ready to die at your feet. Le Comte, replied Diana, with majestic solemnity, do not say to me things fit only to be said to a woman. I belong to another world, and do not live for this. Had I seen you less noble, less good, less generous, had I not for you in the bottom of my heart the tender feeling of a sister for a brother, I should say, rise, Comte, and do not importune with love my ease, which hold it in horror. But I do not say so, Comte, because I suffer in seeing you suffer. I say more. Now that I know you, I will take your hand and place it on my heart, and I will say to you willingly, see, my heart beats no more. Live near me, if you like, and assist day by day, if such be your pleasure, at this painful execution of a body which is being killed by the tortures of the soul, but this sacrifice, which you may accept as happiness. Oh, yes, cried Henri eagerly. Well, this sacrifice I ought to forbid. This very day a change has taken place in my life. I have no longer the right to lean on any human arm, not even on the arm of that generous friend, that noble creature, who lies there, and for a time finds the happiness of forgetfulness. Alas, poor Remy, continued she, with the first change of tone that Henri remarked in her voice, your waking will also be sad. You do not know the progress of my thought. You cannot read in my eyes that you will soon be alone, and that alone I must go to God. What do you mean, madam? Do you also wish to die? Remy, awakened by the cry of the young count, began to listen. "You saw me pray, did you not?" said Diana. "Yes," answered Henri. "This prayer was my due to earth. The joy that you remark on my face, the joy that fills me even now, is the same you would see in me if the angel of death would come and say to me, 'Rise, Diana, and follow me.' Diana, Diana, now I know your name. Diana, cherished name," murmured the young man. "Oh, silence," cried she. "Forget this name which escaped me. No living person has the right to pierce my heart by pronouncing it." "Oh, madam, do not tell me you are going to die." "I do not say that," replied she in a grave voice. "I say that I am about to quit this world of tears, of hatreds, of bad passions, of all interests and desires. I say that I have nothing left to do among the creatures whom God created, my fellow mortals. I have no more tears, no more blood in my heart, no more thoughts. They are dead. I am a worthless offering. For in renouncing the world I sacrifice nothing, neither desires nor hopes. But such as I am, I offer myself to my God, and he will accept me, he who has made me suffer so much, and yet kept me from sinking under it." Remy, who had heard this, rose slowly and said, "You abandon me." "For God," said Diana, raising her thin white hand to heaven. "It is true," said Remy, sadly, and seizing her hand, he pressed it to his breast. "Oh, what am I by these two hearts?" said Henri. "You are," replied Diana, "the only human creature, except Remy, on whom I have looked twice for years." Henri knelt. "Thanks, madam," said he. "I bow to my destiny. You belong to God. I cannot be jealous." As he rose, they heard the sound of trumpets on the plain, from which the water was rapidly disappearing. The gendarmes seized their arms and were on horseback at once. Henri listened. "Gentlemen," cried he, "those are the admiral's trumpets. I know them. Oh, God, may they announce my brother. You see that you still wish something, and still love something. Why, then, should you choose despair, like those who desire nothing, like those who love no one?" "A horse," cried Henri. "Who will lend me a horse?" "But the water is still all around us," said the ensign. "But you see that the plain is practicable. They must be advancing, since we hear their trumpets. Mount to the top of the bank, M. le Comte. The sky is clear. Perhaps you will see." Henri climbed up. The trumpets continued to sound at intervals, but were seemingly stationary. Chapter 71. The Two Brothers. A quarter of an hour after, Henri returned. He had seen a considerable detachment of French troops entrenched on a hill at some distance, excepting a large ditch, which surrounded the place occupied by the gendarmes of Onís. The water had begun to disappear from the plain, the natural slope of the ground in the immediate neighborhood making the waters run toward the sea, and several points of earth, higher than the rest, began to reappear. The slimy mud brought by the rolling waters had covered the whole country, and it was a sad spectacle to see, as the wind cleared the mist, a number of cavaliers stuck in the mud and trying vainly to reach either of the hills. From the other hill, on which the flag of France waved, their cries of distress had been heard, and that was why the trumpets had sounded. The gendarmes now sounded their cornets, and were answered by guns in joyful recognition. About 11 o'clock the sun appeared over the scene of desolation, drying some parts of the plain, and rendering practicable a kind of road. Henri, who tried it first, found that it led by a detour from where they were to the opposite hill, and he believed that though his horse might sink to a certain extent, he would not sink altogether. He therefore determined to try it, and recommending Diana and Remy to the care of the ensign, set off on his perilous way. At the same time as he started, they could see a cavalier leave the opposite hill, and, like Henry, try the road. All the soldiers seemed trying to stop him by their supplications. The two men pursued their way courageously, and soon perceived that their task was less difficult than had been feared. A small stream of water, escaped from a broken aqueduct, washed over the path, and little by little was clearing away the mud. The cavaliers were within 200 feet of each other. "France!" cried the one who came from the opposite hill, at the same time raising his hat, which had a white plume in it. "Oh, It is you, cried Henri, with a burst of joy. You, Henri, you, my brother, cried the other. And they set off as quickly as their horses could manage to go, and soon, among the frantic acclamations of the spectators on each side, embraced long and tenderly. Soon, all, gendarmes and light horse, Huguenots and Catholics, rushed along the road, pioneered by the two brothers. Soon the two camps were joined, and they, where they had thought to find death, nearly 3,000 Frenchmen cried, "Thank God," and "Vive la France." "Gentlemen," said a Huguenot officer, "it is long live the Admiral. You should cry, for it is to the Jews alone that we now have the happiness of embracing our countrymen." Immense acclamations followed this speech. The two brothers talked for some time, and then Jules asked Henri if he had heard news of the Duke. "It appears he is dead," replied Henri. "Is that certain?" The young dame saw his horse drowned, and a rider, whose head was under water, dragged by the stirrup. "It has been a sad day for France," said Jules. Then turning to his men, he said, "Come, gentlemen, let us not lose time. Once the waters have retired, we shall probably be attacked. Let us entrench ourselves until the arrival of news and food." "But, Monseigneur," said a voice, "the horses have eaten nothing since 4 o'clock yesterday, and are dying with hunger." "We have corn in our encampment," said the ensign, "but what shall we do for the men?" "Oh," said Jules, "if there be corn, that is all I ask. The men must live like the horses." "Brother," said Henri, "I want a little conversation with you. Go back to your place, choose a lodging for me, and wait for me there." Henri went back. "We are now in the midst of an army," said he to Remy. "Hide yourselves in the lodging I will show you, and do not let Madame be seen by anyone." Remy installed himself with Diana in the lodging pointed out. About 2 o'clock the Duc de Jose entered with his trumpets blowing, lodged his troops, and gave strict injunctions to prevent disorder. He distributed barley to the men, and hay to the horses, and to the wounded some wine and beer, which had been found in the cellars, and himself, in sight of all, dined on a piece of black bread and a glass of water. Everywhere he was received as a deliverer with cries of gratitude. "Now," said he to his brother, when they were alone, "let the Flemings come, and I will beat them, and even, if this goes on, eat them, for in truth I am very hungry, and this is miserable stuff," added he, throwing into a corner the piece of bread, which in public he had eaten so enthusiastically. "But now, Henri, tell me how it happens that I find you in Flanders when I thought you in Paris." "My brother," said Henri, "life became insupportable to me at Paris, and I set out to join you in Flanders." "All from love?" asked Jules. "No, from despair. Now, and I am no longer in love. My passion is sadness." "My brother, permit me to tell you that you have chosen a miserable woman. Virtue that cares not for the sufferings of others is barbarous, is an absence of Christian charity." "Oh, my brother, do not calumniate virtue." "I do not calumniate virtue. Henri, I accuse vice, that is all. I repeat that this is a miserable woman, and not worth all the torment she makes you suffer." "Oh, mon Dieu, in such a case you should use all your strength and all your power. Henri, in your place, I should have taken her house by assault, and then herself, and when she was conquered, and came to throw her arms round your neck and say, 'Henri, I adore you,' I should have repulsed her, and said, 'You do well, madam, it is your turn. I have suffered enough for you to suffer also.'" Henri seized his brother's hand. "You do not mean a word of what you say," said he. "Yes, on my honor." "You, so good, so generous." "Generosity with heartless people is folly." "Oh, Zeus, Zeus, you do not know this woman." "No, I do not wish to know her." "Why not?" "Because she would make me commit what others would call a crime, but which I should call an act of justice." "Oh, my good brother, how lucky you are not to be in love. But, if you please, let us leave my foolish love, and talk of other things." "So be it. I do not like to talk of your folly. You see we want provisions." "Yes, and I have thought of a method of getting them. What is it? I cannot leave here until I have certain news of the army, for the position is good, and I could defend myself against 5 times our number. But I may send out a body of scouts, and they will bring news and provisions also, for Flanders is a fine country. Not very, brother. I speak of it as God made it, and not men, who eternally spoil the works of God. Do you know, Henri, what folly this prince committed, what this unlucky Francois has lost through pride and precipitation? His soul is gone to God, so let us be silent. But in truth he might have acquired immortal glory in one of the most beautiful kingdoms in Europe, while he has, on the contrary, aided no one but William of Orange. But do you know, Henri, that the Antwerpians fought well? And you also, so they say, brother. Yes, it was one of my good days, and besides there was something that excited me. What was it? I met on the field of battle a sword that I knew. French? Yes, French. In the ranks of the Flemings. At their head, Henri. This is a secret which forms a sequel to Salcede's business. However, dear brother, here you are, safe and sound. To my great joy, I, who have done nothing yet, must do something also. And what will you do? Give me the command of your scouts, I beg. No, it is too dangerous. Henri, I would not say so before strangers, but I do not wish you to die an obscure death. The scouts may meet with some of those horrid Flemings who fight with flails and scythes. You kill 1,000 of them, and the last cuts you in 2 or disfigures you. No, Henri, if you will die, let it be a more glorious death than that. My brother, grant me what I ask, I beg. I promise you to be prudent and to return here. Well, I understand. What? You wish to try if the fame of a brave action will not soften the heart of this ferocious tigress. Confess that that is what makes you insist on it. I will confess it if you wish, brother. Well, you are right. Women who resist a great love sometimes yield to fame. I do not hope that. If you do it without this hope, you are mad. Henri, seek no more reasons for this woman's refusal than that she has neither eyes nor heart. You give me the command, brother. I must, if you will have it so. Can I go tonight? You must, Henri. You understand we cannot wait long. How many men do you give me? 100, not more. I cannot weaken my force here, you know, Henri. Less, if you like. Brother. No, I would wish to give you double. Only promise me, on your honor, that if you meet with more than 300 men, you will retreat and not get killed. My brother, said Henri, smiling, you sell your glory very dear. Then I will neither sell nor give it to you, and another officer shall command. My brother, give your orders and I will execute them. You will only engage with equal, double, or triple forces, but not with more. I swear it. Very well. Now, what men would you like to take? Let me take 100 of the young dames of Onís. I have plenty of friends there, and can choose whom I like. That will do. When shall I set out? At once. Take 1 day's ration for the men and 2 for the horses. Remember, I want speedy and certain news. I go. Brother, are there any other orders? Do not spread the news of the Duke's death. Let it be believed he is here. Exaggerate my strength, and if you find the Duke's body, although he was a bad man and a poor general, yet, as he belonged to the royal house of France, have it put in an oak coffin and brought back by your men, that he may be buried at St. Denis. Good. Brother, now, is this all? All. But promise me once more, Henri, you are not deceiving me. You will not seek death. No. Brother, I had that thought when I came to join you, but I have it no longer. And when did it leave you? 3 hours ago. On what occasion? Excuse me, brother. Of course, Henri, your secrets are your own. Oh, how good you are, brother. And the young men, once more embracing each other, separated with smiles. Chapter 72. The Expedition. Henri, full of joy, hastened to Diana and Romy. "Get ready. In a quarter of an hour we set out," said he. "You will find 2 horses settled at the door of the little wooden staircase leading to this corridor. Join my suite and say nothing." Then, going out on the balcony, he cried, "Trumpet of the gendarmes, sound the call." The call was quickly heard, and all the gendarmes ranged themselves round the house. "Gendarmes," said Henri, "my brother has given me, for the time, the command of your company, and has ordered me to set out tonight to obtain provisions and information as to the movements of the enemy, and 100 of you are to accompany me. The mission is dangerous, but necessary for the safety of all. Who are willing to go?" The whole 300 offered themselves. "Gentlemen," said Henri, "I thank you all. You have rightly been called the example to the army, but I can but take 100, and as I do not wish to choose, let chance decide. Monsieur," continued he, to the ensign, "draw lots, if you please." While this was being done, Jules gave his last instructions to his brother. "Listen, Henri," said he. "The country is drying, and there is a communication between Courtigues and Rupelmonde. You will march between a river and a stream, the Scheldt and the Rupel. I trust that there will be no necessity for you to go as far as Rupelmonde to find provisions. My men took 3 peasants prisoners. I give one of them to you for a guide, but no false pity. At the least appearance of treason, shoot him without mercy." He then tenderly embraced his brother and gave the order for departure. The 100 men drawn by lots were ready, and the guide was placed between 2, with pistols in their hands, while Remy and his companion mixed with the rest. Henri gave no directions about them, thinking that curiosity was already quite sufficiently aroused about them, without augmenting it by precautions more dangerous than salutary. He himself did not stay by them, but rode at the head of his company. Their march was slow, for often the ground nearly gave way under them, and they sank in the mud. Sometimes figures were seen flying over the plain. They were peasants who had been rather too quick in returning to their homes, and who fled at the sight of the enemy. Sometimes, however, they were unlucky Frenchmen, half dead with cold and hunger, and who, in their uncertainty of meeting with friends or enemies, preferred waiting for daylight to continue their painful journey. They traversed 2 leagues in 3 hours, which brought the adventurous band to the banks of the Rupel, along which a stony road ran. But here danger succeeded to difficulty, and 2 or 3 horses lost their footing on the slimy stones, and rolled with their riders into the still rapid waters of the river. More than once also, from some boat on the opposite bank, shots were fired, and 1 man was killed at Diana's side. She manifested regret for the man, but no fear for herself. Henri, in these different circumstances, showed himself to be a worthy captain and true friend. He rode first, telling all the men to follow in his steps, trusting less to his own sagacity than to that of the horse his brother had given him. 3 leagues from Rupelmonde, the gendarmes came upon 6 French soldiers sitting by a turf fire. The unfortunates were cooking some horseflesh, the only food they had had for 2 days. The approach of the gendarmes caused great trouble among the guests at the sad feast. 2 or 3 rose to fly, but the others stopped them, saying, "If they are enemies, they can but kill us, and all will be over." "France! France!" cried Henri. On recognizing their countrymen, they ran to them, and were given cloaks to wrap round them and something to drink, and were allowed to mount en croupe behind the valets, and in this manner they accompanied the detachment. Half a league further on they met 4 men of the 4th Light Horse, with, however, only 1 horse between them. They were also welcomed. At last they arrived on the banks of the Scheldt. The night was dark, and the gendarmes found 2 men who were trying, in bad Flemish, to obtain from a boatman a passage to the other side, which he refused. The ensign, who understood Dutch, advanced softly, and heard the boatman say, "You are French, and shall die here. You shall not cross." "It is you who shall die, if you do not take us over at once," replied one of the men, drawing his dagger. "Keep firm, monsieur," cried the ensign. "We will come to your aid." But as the 2 men turned at these words, the boatman loosened the rope and pushed rapidly from the shore. One of the gendarmes, however, knowing how useful this boat would be, went into the stream on his horse and fired at the boatman, who fell. The boat was left without a guide, but the current brought it back again toward the bank. The two strangers seized it at once and got in. This astonished the ensign. "Gentlemen," said he, "who are you, if you please?" "Gentlemen, we are marine officers, and you are gendarmes of Nice, apparently." "Yes, gentlemen, and very happy to have served you. Will you not accompany us?" "Willingly." "Get into the wagons, then, if you are too tired to ride." "May we ask where you're going?" said one. "Monsieur, our orders are to push on to Rupelmonde." "Take care," answered he. "We did not pass the stream sooner, because this morning a detachment of Spaniards passed, coming from Antwerp. At sunset we thought we might venture, for 2 men inspire no disquietude, but you, a whole troop. It is true, I will call our chief." Henri approached, and asked what was the matter. "These gentlemen met this morning a detachment of Spaniards following the same road as ourselves." "How many were they?" "About 50. "And does that stop you?" "No, but I think it would be well to secure the boat, in case we should wish to pass the stream. It will hold 20 men." "Good. Let us keep the boat. There should be some houses at the junction of the Scheldt and Rupel." "There is a village," said a voice. "Then let 2 men descend the stream with the boat, while we go along the bank." "We will bring the boat if you will let us," said one of the officers. "If you wish it, gentlemen, but do not lose sight of us, and come to us in the village. But if we abandon the boat, someone will take it. You will find 10 men waiting, to whom you can deliver it." "It is well," said one, and they pushed off from the shore. "It is singular," said Henri, "but I fancy I know that voice." An hour after they arrived at the village, which was occupied by the 50 Spaniards, but they, taken by surprise when they least expected it, made little resistance. Henri had them disarmed and shut up in the strongest house in the village, and left 10 men to guard them. 10 more were sent to guard the boat, and 10 others placed as sentinels, with the promise of being relieved in an hour. 20 of the others then sat down in the house opposite to that in which the prisoners were, to the supper which had been prepared for them. Henri chose a separate room for Remy and Diana. He then placed the ensign at table with the others, telling him to invite the 2 naval officers when they arrived. He next went out to look for accommodation for the rest of the men, and when he returned in half an hour he found them waiting supper for him. Some had fallen asleep on their chairs, but his entrance roused them. The table, covered with cheese, pork, and bread, with a pot of beer by each man, looked almost tempting. Henri sat down and told them to begin. "Apropos," said he, "have the strangers arrived?" "Yes, there they are at the end of the table." Henri looked and saw them in the darkest corner of the room. "Gentlemen," said he, "you are badly placed, and I think you are not eating." "Thanks, M. le Comte," said one. "We are very tired, and more in need of rest than food. We told your officers so, but they insisted, saying that it was your orders that we should sup with you. We feel the honor, but if, nevertheless, instead of keeping us longer, you would give us a room." "Is that also the wish of your companion?" said Henri, and he looked at this companion, whose hat was pushed down over his eyes, and who had not yet spoken. "Yes, Comte," replied he, in a scarcely audible voice. Henri rose, walked straight to the end of the table, while every one watched his movements and astonished look. "Monsieur," said he, to the one who had spoken first, "do me a favor." "What is it, M. le Comte?" "Tell me if you are not Aurélie's brother, or Aurélie himself." "Aurélie!" cried all. "And let your companion," continued Henri, "raise his hat a little and let me see his face, or else I shall call him Monseigneur, and bow before him." And as he spoke, he bowed respectfully, hat in hand. The officer took off his hat. "Monseigneur le Duc d'Anjou," cried all. "The Duke living!" "Mau evoi, gentlemen," replied he, "since you will recognize your conquered and fugitive prince, I shall not deny myself to you any longer. I am the Duc d'Anjou." "Vive, Monseigneur!" cried all. Chapter 73. Pour a meal. Oh, silence, gentlemen, said the prince. Do not be more content than I am at my good fortune. I am enchanted not to be dead, you may well believe. And yet, if you had not recognized me, I should not have been the first to boast of being alive. What? Monseigneur, cried Henri. You recognize me. You found yourself among a troop of Frenchmen, and would have left us to mourn your loss, without undeceiving us. Gentlemen, besides a number of reasons which made me wish to preserve my incognito, I confess that I should not have been sorry, since I was believed to be dead, to hear what funeral oration would have been pronounced over me. Monseigneur, yes, I am like Alexander of Macedon. I make will like an artist, and have as much self-love, and I believe I have committed a fault. Monseigneur, said Henri, lowering his eyes, do not say such things. Why not? The Pope only is infallible, and ever since Boniface VIII, there has been disputed. See to what you expose us, Monseigneur. If any of us had given his opinion on this expedition, and it had been blamed. Well, why not? Do you think I have not blamed myself, not for having given battle, but for having lost it? Monseigneur, this goodness frightens me, and will your highness permit me to say that this gaiety is not natural? I trust your highness is not suffering. A terrible cloud passed over the prince's face, making it as black as night. No, said he, I was never better, thank God, than now, and I am glad to be among you all. The officers bowed. How many men have you, Dubauchage? Asked he. 100, Monseigneur. Ah, 100 out of 10,000. That is like the defeat at Cannes. Gentlemen, they will send a bushel of your rings to Antwerp, but I doubt if the Flemish beauties could wear them, unless they had their fingers pared by their husbands' knives, which, I must say, cut well. Monseigneur, replied Henri, if our battle was like the Battle of Cannes, at least we are more lucky than the Romans, for we have preserved our Paulus Emilius. On my life, gentlemen, the Paulus Emilius of Antwerp was Jo's, and doubtless, to preserve the resemblance with his heroic model to the end, your brother is dead, is he not, Dubauchage? Henri felt wounded at this cold question. No, Monseigneur, he lives, replied he. Ah, so much the better, said the Duke with his icy smile. What? Our brave Jerus lives. Where is he, that I may embrace him? He is not here, Monseigneur. Ah, wounded. No, Monseigneur, he is safe and sound. But a fugitive like me, mundering, famished, and ashamed. Alas, the proverb is right, for glory, the sword, after the sword, blood, after blood, tears. Monseigneur, I am happy to tell your highness that my brother has been happy enough to save 3,000 men, with whom he occupies a large village about 7 leagues from here, and I am acting as scout for him. The Duke grew pale. 3,000 men. He has saved 3,000 men. He is a perfect Xenophon, and it is very lucky for me that my brother sent him to me. It is not the Valois who can take for their motto hill a rider. Oh, Monseigneur, said Henri, sadly, seeing that this gaiety had a Samba jealousy. It is true, is it not? Orally, continued the Duke. I returned to France like Francois after the Battle of Pavia. All is lost but honor. Ah, ah. A sad silence received these laughs, more terrible than sobs. Monseigneur, said Henri, tell me how the tutelary genius of France saved your highness. Oh, dear Comte, the tutelary genius of France was occupied with something else, and I had to save myself. And how, Monseigneur? By my legs. No smile welcomed this joke, which the Duke would certainly have punished with death if made by another. Yes, yes, he continued, how we ran. Did we not, my brave Orly? Every one, said Henri, knows the calm bravery and military genius of your highness, and we beg you not to distress us by attributing to yourself faults which you have not. The best general is not invincible, and Hannibal himself was conquered at Zama. Yes, but Hannibal had won the battles of Trebia, Thrasymene, and can, while I have only one that of catechin braces. It is not enough to sustain the comparison. But Monseigneur jests when he says he ran away. No, I do not. Pardieu, do you see anything to jest about? Dubauchage? Could anyone have done otherwise? Said Aurelie. Hold your tongue, Aurelie, or ask the shade of Saint Aignan what could have been done. Aurelie hung his head. Ah, you do not know the history of Saint Aignan. I will tell it to you. Imagine, then, that when the battle was declared to be lost, he assembled 500 horse, and, instead of flying like the rest, came to me and said, "We must attack them, Monseigneur." "What? Attack?" said I. "They are 100 to 1. Were they 1,000 to 1, I would attack them," replied he, with a hideous grimace. "Attack if you please," said I. "I do not." "Give me your horse, and take mine," said he. "Mine is fresh, yours is not, and as I do not mean to fly, any horse is good for me." And then he took my white horse and gave me his black one, saying, "Prince, that horse will go 20 leagues in 4 hours if you like." Then, turning to his men, he cried, "Come, gentlemen, follow me, all those who will not turn their backs." And he rode toward the enemy with a second grimace, more frightful than the first. "Ah, you do not know the history of Saint Aignan. I will tell it to you. He thought he should have met men, but he met water instead, and Saint Aignan and his paladins were lost. Had he listened to me, instead of performing that act of useless foolhardiness, we should have had him at this table, and he would not have been making, as he probably now is, a grimace still uglier than the first." A thrill of horror ran through the assembly. "This wretch has no heart," thought Henri. "Oh, why does his misfortune and his birth protect him from the words I long to say to him?" "Gentlemen," said Aurelie, in a low voice, for he felt the effect these words had produced, "you see how Monseigneur is affected. Do not heed what he says, for since his misfortune I think he has really moments of delirium. And so," continued the Duke, emptying his glass, "that his house Saint Aignan is dead and I alive. However, in dying he did me a last service, for it was believed, as he rode my horse, that it was me, and this belief spread not only among the French, but among the Flemings, who consequently ceased their pursuit. But reassure yourselves, gentlemen, we shall have our revenge, and I am mentally organizing the most formidable army that ever existed. Meanwhile, Monseigneur," said Henri, "will your highness take the command of my men? It is not fit that I should continue to do so when you are here." "So be it, and, first, I order everyone to sup, particularly you, Dubauchage. You have eaten nothing." "Monseigneur, I am not hungry." "In that case return to visit the posts. Tell the chiefs that I live, but beg them not to rejoice too openly until we gain a better citadel, or rejoin the army of our invincible Juice, for I confess I do not wish to be taken now, after having escaped from fire and water. Monseigneur, you shall be strictly obeyed, and no one shall know excepting ourselves that we have the honor of your company among us." "And these gentlemen will keep the secret," said the Duke, looking round. All bowed, and Dubauchage went out. It only required an hour for this fugitive, this conquered runaway, to become again proud, careless, and imperious. To command 100 men or 100,000 men was still to command. While Dubauchage executed his orders with the best grace he could, Francois asked questions. He was astonished that a man of the rank of Dubauchage had consented to take the command of this handful of men, and of such a perilous expedition. The Duke was always suspicious, and asked, therefore, and learned that the admiral had only yielded to his brother's earnest request. It was the ensign who gave this information, he who had been superseded in his command by Henri himself, as Henri had been by the Duke. The prince fancied he detected a slight irritation in this man's mind against Dubauchage. Therefore he continued to interrogate him. "But," said he, "what was the comte's reason for soliciting so earnestly such a poor command?" "First, zeal for the service, no doubt." "First, what else?" "Ah, Monseigneur, I do not know." "You deceive me. You do know." Monseigneur, I can give only, even to your highness, public reasons. You see, said the Duke, turning to the others, I was quite right to hide myself, gentlemen, since there are in my army secrets from which I am excluded. Ah, Monseigneur, said the ensign, you misunderstand me. There are no secrets but those which concern M. du Bouchage. Might it not be, for example, that, while serving the general interests, he might have wished to render a service to some friend or relation by escorting him? Who here is a friend or relation of the Comte? Tell me, that I may embrace him. Monseigneur, said Aurelie, mixing in the conversation, I have discovered a part of the secret. This relation whom M. du Bouchage wished to escort is a lady. Ah, why did they not tell me so frankly? That dear Henri, it is quite natural. Let us shut our eyes to the relation and speak of her no more. You had better not, Monseigneur, for there seems a great mystery. How so? Yes, the lady, like the celebrated Bradamante, about whom I have so often sung to your highness, disguises herself in the dress of a man. Oh, Monseigneur, cried the ensign, M. de Bouchage seems to me to have a great respect for this lady, and probably will be very angry at any indiscretion. Doubtless, monsieur, we will be mute as sepulchres, as mute as poor Saint Aignan. Only, if we see the lady, we will try not to make grimaces at her. Where is this lady, Aurelie? Upstairs. Upstairs? What, in this house? Yes, Monseigneur, but hush. Here is M. du Bouchage. Hush, said the prince, laughing. Chapter 74. One of the souvenirs of the Duc d'Anjou. Henri, as he entered, could hear the hateful laugh of the prince, but he had not lived enough with him to know the danger that always lurked in his laugh. Besides, he could not suspect the subject of conversation, and no one dared to tell him in the Duke's presence. Besides, the Duke, who had already settled his plan, kept Henri near him until all the other officers were gone. He then changed the distribution of the posts. Henri had established his quarters in that house, and had intended to send the ensign to a post near the river, but the Duke now took Henri's place, and sent him where the ensign was to have been. Henri was not astonished, for the river was an important point. Before going, however, he wished to speak to the ensign, and recommend to his care the two people under his protection, and whom he was forced for the time to abandon. But at the first word that Henri began to speak, to him the Duke interposed. Secrets, said he, with his peculiar smile. The ensign had understood, when too late, the fault he had been guilty of. No, Monseigneur, replied he, M. le Comte was only asking me how much powder we had left fit to use. The answer had two aims. The first to turn away the Duke's suspicions, if he had any, and the second to let de Bouchage know that he could count on a friend in him. Ow, said the Duke, forced to seem to believe what he was told. And as he turned to the door, the ensign whispered to Henri, the prince knows you are escorting someone. Henri started, but it was too late. The Duke remarked the start, and, as if to assure himself that his orders were executed, proposed to Henri to accompany him to his post, which he was forced to accede to. Henri wished to warn Remy to be on his guard, but it was impossible. All he could do was to say to the ensign, watch well over the powder, watch it as I would myself. Will you not? Yes, M. le Comte, replied the young man. On the way the Duke said to du Bouchage, where is this powder that you speak of? In the house we have just left, your highness. Oh, be easy. Then, du Bouchage, I know too well the importance of such an article in our situation to neglect it. I will watch over it myself. They said no more until they arrived, when the Duke, after giving Henri many charges not to quit his post, returned. He found Aurelie wrapped in an officer's cloak, sleeping on one of the seats in the dining room. The Duke woke him. Come, said he. Yes, Monseigneur. Do you know what I mean? Yes, the unknown lady, the relation of M. du Bouchage. Good. I see that the Pharaoh of Brussels and the beer of Louvain have not clouded your intellects. Oh, No, Monseigneur, I'm more ingenious than ever. Then call up all your imagination and guess. Well, I guess that your highness is envious. Ah, parbleu, I always am, but what is it about just now? You wish to know who is the brave creature who has followed the de Joes through fire and water. You have just hit it, per mille periculum modis, as Margot would say. Apropos, have you written to her, Orlu? To whom, Monseigneur? To my sister Margot. Had I to write to her? Certainly. About what? To tell her that we are beaten, ruined, and that she must look out for herself, for that Spain, disembarrassing me in the north, will fall on her in the south. Ah, true. You have not written? No, Monseigneur. You slept? Yes, I confess it. But even if I had thought of it, with what could I have written? I have here neither pen, paper, nor ink. Well, seek. Quae invenies, as it is written. How in the devil's name am I to find it in the hut of a peasant, who probably did not know how to write? Seek, stupid. If you do not find that, you will find... What? Something else. Oh, fool that I was, cried orally. Your highness is right. I am stupid, but I am very sleepy, you see. Well, keep awake for a little while, and, since you have not written, I will write. Only go and seek what is necessary. Go, orally, and do not come back till you have found it. I will remain here. I go, Monseigneur. And if, in your researches, you discover that the house is picturesque, you know how I admire Flemish interiors, orally. Yes, Monseigneur. Well, call me. Immediately, Monseigneur, be easy. Orally rose, and, with a step light as a bird, went up the staircase. In 5 minutes he returned to his master. Well, asked he. Well, Monseigneur, if I may believe appearances, the house is devilishly picturesque. How so? Pest, Monseigneur, because one cannot get in to look. What do you mean? I mean that it is guarded by a dragon. What foolish joke is this? Oh, Monseigneur, it is unluckily not a foolish joke, but a sad truth. The treasure is on the first floor, in a room in which I can see light through the door. Well, before this door lies a man, wrapped in a grey cloak. Oh, M. du Bouchage puts a young dame at the door of his mistress. It is not a young dame, Monseigneur, but some attendant of the ladies or the count's. What kind of a man? Monseigneur, it was impossible to see his face, but I could perfectly see a large Flemish knife in his belt and his hand on it. It is amusing. Go and waken the fellow. Oh, no, Monseigneur. Why not? Why, without counting the knife, I do not wish to amuse myself with making a mortal enemy of de Joes, who stands so well at court. If you had been king of this country, it might have passed, but now you must be gracious, above all with those who saved you, and Jews did save you. They will say so, whether you do or not. You are right, orally, and yet, I understand. Your highness has not seen a woman's face for 15 mortal days. I do not speak of the kind of animals who live here. They are males and females, but do not deserve to be called men and women. I must see this lady, orally. Well, Monseigneur, you may see her, but not through the door. So be it. Then I will see her through the window. Ah, that is a good idea, and I will go and look for a ladder for you. Orally glided into the courtyard, and under a shed found what he wanted. He maneuvered it among horses and men so skillfully as to wake no one, and placed it in the street against the outer wall. It was necessary to be a prince, and sovereignly disdainful of vulgar scruples, today, in the presence of the sentinel, who walked up and down before the door, to accomplish an action so audaciously insulting to du Bouchage. Orlev felt this, and pointed out the sentinel, who, now observing, called out, Qui vive? Francois shrugged his shoulders and walked up to him. My friend, said he, this place is the most elevated spot in the village, is it not? Yes, Monseigneur, said the man, recognizing him, and were it not for those lime trees, we could see over great part of the country. I thought so, and therefore I have brought a letter, said the Duke. Go up, orally, or rather, let me go up, I will see for myself. Where shall I place it? Said the hypocritical follower. Oh, anywhere, against that wall, for instance. The sentinel walked off, and the Duke mounted the ladder, Aurelie standing at the foot. The room in which Henri had placed Diana was matted, and had a large oaken bed with serge curtains, a table, and a few chairs. Diana, whose heart seemed relieved from an enormous weight since she had heard the false news of the Duke's death, had, almost for the first time since her father's death, eaten something more substantial than bread, and drunk a little wine. After this she grew sleepy, and Remy had left her, and was sleeping outside her door, not from any suspicion, but because such had been his habit ever since they had left Paris. Diana herself slept with her elbow on the table, and her head leaning on her hand. A little lamp burned on the table, and all looked peaceful here, where such tempestuous emotions had raged and would soon again. In the glass sparkled the Rhine wine, scarcely touched by Diana. She, with her eyes closed, her eyelids veined with azure, her mouth slightly opened, her head thrown back, looked like a sublime vision to the eyes that were violating the sanctity of her retreat. The Duke, on perceiving her, could hardly repress his admiration, and leaned over to examine every detail of her ideal beauty. But all at once he frowned, and came down 2 or 3 steps with a kind of nervous precipitation, and leaning back against the wall, crossed his arms and appeared to reflect. Aurelie watched him as he stood there, with a dreamy air, like a man trying to recall some old souvenir. After a few minutes he remounted and looked in again, but Aurelie called out, Quick, quick, Monseigneur, come down, are his steps. The Duke came down, but slowly. It was time, said Aurelie. Whence comes the sound? From there, said Aurelie, pointing to a dark street. But the sound has ceased. It must have been some spy watching us. Remove the letter. Aurelie obeyed. However, no one appeared, and they heard no more noise. Well, Monseigneur, is she beautiful? Said Aurelie. Very beautiful, said the prince, abstractedly. What makes you sad, then? Did she see you? No, she was asleep. Then what is the matter? Aurelie, it is strange, but I have seen that woman somewhere. You recognized her, then? No, I could not think of her name, but her face gave me a fearful shock. I cannot tell how it is, but I believe I did wrong to look. However, just on account of the impression she has made on you, we must find out who she is. Certainly we must. Seek well in your memory, Monseigneur. Is it at court you have seen her? No, I think not. In France, Navarre, Flanders? No. A Spaniard, perhaps? I do not think so. An English lady, one of Queen Elizabeth's? No. I seem to know her more intimately, and that she appeared to me in some terrible scene. Then you would have recognized her at once. You have not seen many such scenes. Do you think so? Said the Duke, with a gloomy smile. Now, continued he, that I am sufficiently master of myself to analyze my sensations, I feel that this woman is beautiful, but with the beauty of death, beautiful as a shade, as a figure in a dream. And I have had 2 or 3 frightful dreams in my life, which left me cold at the heart. Well, now I am sure that it was in one of those dreams that I saw that woman. Your Highness is not generally so susceptible, and but that I believe that we are watched from that street, I would mount in my turn and look. My foi, you are right. Aurelie, what does it matter whether we are watched or not? Go up and look. Aurelie made a move forward to obey, when a hasty step was heard, and Henri's voice, crying, Monseigneur. You hear, said the Duke, while Aurelie bounded back to his side. You hear, Comte? On what pretext have you quitted your post? Monseigneur, replied Henri, firmly, your highness can punish me if you think proper. Meanwhile, my duty was to come here, and I came. The Duke glanced toward the window. Your duty, Comte? Explain that to me, said he. Monseigneur, horsemen have been seen on the Spanish side of the river, and we do not know if they are friends or enemies. Numerous? Asked the Duke anxiously. Very numerous, Monseigneur. Well, Comte, no false bravery. You will do well to return. Awake the gendarmes and let us decamp. It will be the most prudent plan. Doubtless, Monseigneur, but it will be urgent, I think, to warn my brother. 2 men will do. Then I will go with a gendarme. No, do Bouchage. You must come with us. Peste, it is not at such a moment that I can separate from a defender like you. When does your highness set out? Said Henri, bowing. At once, Comte. Hola, someone, cried Henri. The young ensign came out immediately from a dark street. Henri gave his orders, and soon the place was filled with gendarmes preparing for departure. Among them the Duke talked with his officers. Gentlemen, said he, the Prince of Orange is pursuing me, it seems, but it is not proper that a son of France should be taken prisoner. Let us, therefore, yield to numbers, and fall back upon Brussels. I shall be sure of life and liberty while I remain among you. Then, turning to Aurélie, you remain, said he. This woman cannot follow us. Jews will not dare to bring her with him in my presence. Besides, we are not going to a ball, and the race we shall run would fatigue a lady. Where are you going, Monseigneur? To France. I think my business is over here. But to what part of France? Does Monseigneur think it prudent to return to court? No, I shall stop at one of my castles, Châteauroux, for example. Has your highness decided on that? Yes, Châteauroux suits me in all respects. It is a good distance from Paris, about 28 leagues, and I can watch from thence de Guise, who are half the year at Soissons. So bring the beautiful unknown to Châteauroux. But, monsieur, perhaps she will not be brought. Nonsense. Since du Bouchage accompanies me, and she follows him, it will be quite natural. But she may wish to go somewhere else, if she sees that I wish to bring her to you. But I repeat that it is not to me that you are to bring her, but to the Comte. Really, one would think it was the first time you had aided me in such circumstances. Have you money? I have the 2 rouleaux of gold that you gave me when you left the camp. Well, by any and every method, bring me the lady to Châteauroux. Perhaps when I see her nearer I shall recognize her. And the man also. Yes, if he is not troublesome. But if he is, do with him what you would do with a stone which is in your way. Throw it away. Good, Monseigneur. While the 2 conspirators formed their plans, Henri went up and woke Remy. He knocked at the door in a peculiar fashion, and it was almost immediately opened by Diana. Behind Remy she perceived Henri. Good evening, monsieur, said she, with a smile which had long been foreign to her face. Oh, pardon me, madam, said Henri, for intruding on you, but I come to make my adieus. Your adieus? Comte, you are going? To France? Madam. And you leave us? I am forced to do so. My duty is to obey the prince. The prince? Is there a prince here? Asked Remy. Yes, M. le Duc d'Anjou, who was believed dead and who has been miraculously saved, has joined us. Diana uttered a terrible cry, and Remy turned as pale as though he had been suddenly struck with death. The Duc d'Anjou living, cried Diana. The Duc d'Anjou here. Had he not been here, madam, and ordered me to follow him, I should have accompanied you to the convent into which you tell me you are about to retire. Yes, said Remy, the convent, and he put his finger on his lip. I would have accompanied you the more willingly, madam, said Henri, because I fear that you may be annoyed by the prince's people. How so? Yes, I believe that he knows there is a lady here, and he thinks that she is a friend of mine. And what makes you think so? Our young ensign saw him place a letter against this window and look in. Oh, cried Diana, mon Dieu, mon Dieu. Reassure yourself. Madam, he heard him say that he did not know you. Besides, the Duke is going to set off at once. In a quarter of an hour you will be alone and free. Permit me to salute you with respect, and to tell you once more that till my last sigh, my heart will beat for you and with you. Adieu, madam, adieu. And the Comte, bowing, took 2 steps back. No, no, cried Diana, wildly. No, God cannot have done this. He cannot have brought this man to life again. No, monsieur, you must be wrong. He is dead. At this moment, as if in reply, the Duke's voice was heard calling from below. Comte, we are waiting for you. You hear him, madam, said Henri. For the last time, adieu. And pressing Remy's hand, he flew down the staircase. Diana approached the window trembling, and with a convulsive shudder, like the bird fascinated by the serpent of the Antilles. She saw the Duke on horseback, and the light of the torches held by the gendarmes fell on his face. Oh, he lives. The demon lives, murmured she, and we must live also. He is setting out for France. So be it. Remy, we also must go to France.